Chapter 301, The Black Strange Universe. Lucian stood before the heavy oak doors of the New York sanctum and offered the single word, please. Without a word in return, the black-robed wizard at his side smiled gently and stepped aside. Lucian didn't know who this man was, but his teacher, Guyi, had instructed him to wait here, and so he obeyed. Once the door swung open, Lucian found himself stepping into an impossible space. The sanctuary's interior, though tucked within an unassuming villa, felt at least 3 or 4 times larger than its exterior should allow, an effect that reminded him of his own traceless extension spell, though this was far subtler. Richly aged wood paneling lined the walls, and antique furnishings gave the place an almost timeless quality. From the ceiling hung dozens of crystal pendants, each pulsing with a faint magical aura. Lucian guessed they were enchanted charms, each serving some hidden purpose. "Thank you," he said as he fell into step behind the wizard. "May I ask your name?" The man slowed and turned. His midnight black cloak rustled softly. "You may call me Master Mordo," he replied with a courteous nod. Master Mordo led Lucian down a short corridor into a guest parlor, where deep-seated chairs and low tables were arranged around a crackling hearth. As Lucian sank into one of the velvet armchairs, he realized that every inch of this place whispered secrets he was about to uncover. Lucian stepped into the living room and paused. At its center sat a middle-aged woman in a flowing white robe, her head cleanly shaven. She moved with quiet grace as she prepared tea, and when she looked up, her gentle smile seemed to fill the spacious chamber. A black-robed attendant lingered in the corner. "This is the Supreme Mage," he announced, then bowed and withdrew. The Supreme Mage, Guyi, gestured to a low chair across from her. Steam curled from a delicate porcelain cup she placed before Lucian. "Please, sit," she said. "Would you care for some tea?" Lucian took the seat, accepted the cup, and inclined his head. "Thank you." Guyi studied him for a moment. "I understand why you've come to me. I am willing to teach you time magic, but on one condition." She spoke plainly without preamble. Over the past days, she had watched Lucian closely and discerned both his potential and his character. To her, there was no need for niceties. Lucian set down the cup and met her gaze. He noticed how completely she'd taken control of their meeting, but the manner of her approach mattered less than the outcome. After a heartbeat, he smiled. "Tell me your condition." It was not a matter of who held the initiative, he thought. What mattered was whether the terms would serve his purpose. Lucian leaned back, wholly satisfied with how the exchange had played out. He hadn't minded who held the initiative. He should have known it would end this way. After all, he was up against someone who had mastered time magic, who possessed the time gem and could peer into what was yet to come. There was simply no way he could seize the upper hand. "People love to say the future is unpredictable," he mused silently. "But when our world first came into being, every event was woven into a single, unbroken timeline. Any deviation would be gently corrected, snapping everything back onto its ordained path." He paused, remembering the moment that changed everything. That was before. Now, after one man's sacrifice, those stories have unraveled. The future isn't fixed anymore. Every universe can follow countless new trajectories. The Ancient One set her teacup down with a soft clink and studied him with calm, piercing eyes. "Lucian," she began, "you've met my chosen successor, the next Sorcerer Supreme, Stephen Strange. In this universe, he carried an immutable fate node. If events unfolded along that line, he was destined for catastrophe. I could not stand by and watch that happen. I had to change his destiny." She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "And in you, I have found someone who holds more potential to reshape the few, truer than any I've ever known. If you're willing, perhaps you can alter that nexus point." At the Ancient One's words, Lucian froze. His mind raced, sifting through every scrap of Marvel lore he'd absorbed in his previous life. Then his eyes widened. "So that's what's happening." He felt a flicker of surprise that no one from the Time Variance Authority had swooped in to correct his every move, despite the countless temporal divergences he'd already created. Now it made sense. In this branch of the movie universe, Loki had slain Kang the Conqueror within the TVA and taken on the mantle of the God of Stories. Armed with that knowledge, Lucian could finally point which reality he occupied, according to the Ancient One's clues, This was the universe of Black Strange, the one destined for total annihilation. In its first iteration, Lucian himself had never lost the use of his hands to a car crash. Instead, that accident had claimed his girlfriend, Christine. After defeating Dormammu and mastering the Time Stone, he'd used its power to return to the past and prevent her death, an act that irreversibly fractured the timeline. Lucian tried again and again. No matter what he did, Christine always died. Her death proved to be a fixed point in time, an unbreakable node that drove him to Camartage in the first place. There, under the tutelage of the Ancient One, he mastered the mystic arts, claimed the title of Sorcerer Supreme, and wielded the Time Stone to turn back the clock. Yet every attempt ended the same way. Christine's life was snuffed out, and Lucian was pulled back to Camartage to begin anew. Refusing to accept fate's decree, Lucian set his sights on a darker, riskier path. He ventured into the legendary, long-lost library of Cagliaste, where ancient scrolls spoke of power beyond the bounds of a single universe. There he learned to hunt down and absorb creatures summoned from other dimensions, even the most fearsome interdimensional demons. Bit by bit, he siphoned their energy, forging a magic that surpassed multiversal levels. Armed with this unimaginable power, Lucian returned to that pivotal night and at last broke the cruel loop. Christine survived, but victory came at a terrible price. In ripping apart the node that bound their fates, he unleashed forces beyond control. The universe itself trembled, and then began to unravel. "If I agree, what must I do?" Lucian asked. Guyi offered a reassuring smile. "Nothing more than giving your consent. Once you do, the shifts will begin, and the universe will start moving toward a better outcome." Lucian considered her words. He was the one who had glimpsed more possible futures than anyone else, and each time he looked, the tapestry of fate changed in response. Likewise, the cosmos itself, now influenced by his presence, was alive with new potential. Though the universe's path was no longer bound by its old limits, the pivotal nodes of destiny, especially those critical moments on which everything hinges, remained beyond the reach of ordinary people. Only someone like Lucian, with his unique gift, could succeed where others could not. "Very well," he said, nodding firmly. "I agree." He felt no hesitation. Here, in this Black Strange universe, even if Guyi chose not to guide him through the intricacies of temporal magic, once he understood the stakes, Lucian would find a way to intervene. He would not stand by and watch Black Strange destroy all of existence. Lucian could see exactly what Guyi was getting at. He carried within him endless potential for change. After all, versions of him existed in countless other worlds. With every passing moment, his power swelled, and naturally, his influence over this universe grew right along with it. In fact, his rising strength had already begun to rewrite the fates of many. The clearest proof: Wolverine and Professor X, once thought dead, now walked the earth as very much living men. Chapter 302, The Blue Book of the Bunker, Update 1. After emerging from the New York sanctuary, Lucian paused long enough to chant a brief tracking spell, reveal the location of Stephen Strange. A pale, glowing arrow sprang from his outstretched palm and arced through the night air, pointing him toward a hospital roughly 20 blocks away. In under 10 minutes, Lucian found himself standing before St. Agnes Medical Center. It was just after 8 o'clock, and Dr. Strange had just stepped out of the hospital, white coat still fastened, hand on the door handle of a sleek black sedan. Rather than driving off, he lingered on the curb, as if expecting someone. Seeing his chance, Lucian reached deep into his power. With a subtle gesture, he seized control of a speeding car, forcing its steering wheel to jerk violently. The vehicle skidded across 3 lanes and bore down on the unsuspecting sorcerer. Stephen froze, eyes widening at the accelerating headlights. In a heartbeat, Lucian hurled himself forward, his hand clasping Stephen's shoulder and yanking him back just feet before impact. The car smashed into a lamppost with a thunderous crunch of metal and glass. Lucian steadied Stephen's shoulders and offered a calm smile. "Be careful, Dr. Strange." Stephen blinked, heart pounding, and stared at the wreckage. He rubbed his arm where Lucian's grip had steadied him. "Christ," he muttered, glancing back at Lucian. "I thought it was just bad drivers out here. Didn't expect a hit job." Lucian's eyes flickered with quiet determination as distant sirens wailed through the night. Their unspoken alliance had just grown more urgent. Lucian helped Thomas Hauser into the back of the patrol car, then turned to Dr. Stephen Strange, who was brushing dust from his coat. Stephen's relief was palpable. "It must have been drunk driving," Stephen said, voice low. "Those men should spend a few years in prison to sober up. Thank you. If it hadn't been for you, I'd have had to call in my colleagues and delay the operation." Lucian waved off the gratitude. "If a neurosurgeon of your caliber were seriously injured, it would be a loss to the entire medical community." Stephen's face lit up at the compliment. A broad smile spread across his features as he stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm Stephen Strange, chief neurosurgeon at this hospital. Forgive me, but I feel as if I've met you before. Have we?" Lucian clasped Stephen's hand firmly. "Please, call me Lucian. I'm here for my own checkup, and I've heard people say you're the finest brain surgeon around." Stephen hesitated. He'd just been on the receiving end of Lucian's subtle memory charm, and though he no longer recalled the details, something about Lucian still felt unmistakably familiar. He forced a laugh, smoothing his hair. "Lucian," he repeated. "Well, it's a pleasure." Before Lucian could reply, the hospital's front doors swung open, and a strikingly beautiful woman emerged. She glanced at Stephen, concern and warmth mingling in her gaze. "Stephen, there you are," she called. Lucian's eyes flicked between them, and a mischievous grin appeared on his face. "Is she your girlfriend?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. Stephen's cheeks colored, and he stammered, caught off guard. The woman laughed softly, stepping closer to offer her hand in greeting. In that moment, handshakes exchanged, laughter shared. A new friendship was quietly forged amid the antiseptic corridors of the hospital. Lucian watched as Stephen nodded and introduced her with his usual gentle gravity. "Yes, this is my girlfriend and fiancée, Christine Palmer." Lucian offered a polite smile. "She's very beautiful. Congratulations." Something about the wording struck him immediately as odd. In the established timeline, Stephen and Christine had grown close, but engagement? That never happened. After Stephen vanished with the Sanctum's affairs for 7 years, Christine moved on. She even married someone else. Stephen attended her wedding as a friend. "Thank you," Strange replied, glancing toward Christ, in as she approached. A faint smile lit up his face. "Let's have dinner together. I owe you one. You just saved my life." Lucian raised a hand in a casual wave. "I'm sorry. I have other things to take care of. Maybe next time." He turned and walked away, though the conflict in his mind kept him from leaving smoothly. Once he reached a quiet corner, he whispered to himself, "If Christine is truly engaged to Dr. Strange, then I'm sorry, Stephen." Not that he intended to kill the Sorcerer Supreme. Ancient One would never allow it, even if Stephen posed a threat to the universe. No, Lucian already had a different plan in mind. Lucian's plan was deceptively simple. Before Christine's own fatal crash in 2016, he would orchestrate a second accident, this time targeting Dr. Stephen Strange. By smashing Strange's car and permanently crippling his hands, Lucian would create the very desperation that drives him to Camartage. There, Lucian would covertly guide Strange through the mystical training necessary to rebuild his shattered bones, and in so doing, ensure he rose to become the Sorcerer Supreme. If Lucian could pull it off, the entire tapestry of fate might be rewritten. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, the blistering desert sun bore down on an isolated strip of sand. A massive transport jet, its fuselage emblazoned with Hydra's sinister emblem, descended in a swirl of dust. Within moments, the ramp hissed open, and Baron Zemo, clad in the black and purple armor of one of Hydra's highest-ranking commanders, stepped onto the dunes. Behind him stood a squad of Hydra troopers, each armored in experimental mecha suits that gleamed under the harsh light. Zemo surveyed the landing zone, then turned to a figure veiled in a dark cloak. "Original Sin," he said, his voice cold but measured. "Consider this operation a small repayment for your late father's service to Hydra, but make no mistake, if you expect to claim a place here, if you want the power your father wielded, you'll have to earn it yourself." The woman before him lowered her hood. Deep crimson skin stretched over high cheekbones and sharply defined brows. "Zorro and Pierce's faction should have fallen in line when I took command," she replied, her tone edged with frustration. "After all, I am Alexandra Schmidt, daughter of the Red Skull himself. Yet a handful of mutants drove us back. Once I secure Father's legacy, I will rebuild the Red Skull's true heir from the ashes. Baron Zemo nodded once. We'll see if your ambition matches your pedigree. Hydra's future is ours to seize, if we can survive the fight. Alexandra, known within the organization as Original Sin, smiled thinly. Beneath the desert sun, she looked every bit the legacy she claimed to be, ready to carve a new power structure out of Hydra's fractured ruins. During the Second World War, the Red Skull launched a covert breeding program on a remote island to produce offspring imbued with Hydra's genetic potential. He assembled Nazi elite and selected women as reproductive assets, hoping to cultivate a new generation of super soldiers. In an unexpected turn, the Skull himself fathered a child with a lowly laundry attendant. Their daughter, whom he contemptuously dismissed as Original Sin, inherited his uncanny abilities, but because he prized male heirs above all else, he refused to acknowledge her as his true successor. When the Red Skull finally fell, his followers splintered, save for a contingent under the enigmatic Zora, now posing as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. During a tense strategy briefing, Baron Zemo spoke bluntly. This so-called Eye of Insight project is unworkable. It's a giant bullseye in the sky. Zora and Director Pierce are too confident in their own plans, yet our intelligence clearly shows these mutants aren't a force to be trifled with. My counsel is, stand down for now. Even Baron Strat, long obsessed with harnessing superhuman power, found himself at a loss when presented with the dossier on these new adversaries. Chief among them was the operative known as Lucian, the very individual who had obliterated an aerospace carrier in a single, terrifying strike. Faced with that display of raw power, Strat couldn't even begin to chart a course of attack. Chapter 7. The Hidden Bunker. Lucian stood at the edge of the Superpower Academy's tarmac, watching squads of mutant recruits assemble in the fading light. Their true allegiance, however, was to Hydra, and the day would come when they'd topple their greatest foe, Captain America, and bring the world to heel. But not yet. Right now, Cap was too formidable. Hydra's strength lay in patience, in waiting for the perfect moment to strike when their enemy was at his weakest. I know, Lucian told his second-in-command, Agent Sin, her face half hidden beneath a dark cowl. Do you really think I'd fall for Pierce's schemes? A flicker of contempt crossed Sin's eyes. Of course not, but this is different. She pointed toward a rusted transport plane parked at the far end of the runway. According to Father's notes, he built a secret bunker directly beneath that aircraft. Within minutes, Lucian and Sin had mustered a squad of Hydra soldiers in reinforced mecha suits. The ground shuddered as hydraulic drills roared to life, churning earth and concrete aside. By dusk, they'd punched through 70 years of sediment and steel, exposing a sealed hatch embedded in bedrock. Lucian gave the signal, and the breach team tore through the hatch's defenses. Inside, a narrow corridor stretched into darkness. At its terminus lay a solitary pedestal, and upon it rested a heavy cobalt blue tome bound in embossed leather. Sin knelt, fingertips brushing the book's cover. Just as he said, it survived every purge. Lucian stepped forward, heart pounding. As Sin cracked the spine, ancient secrets long buried began to stir. Let's see what Father left behind, he murmured, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Lucian stared at the woman's face as it shifted before him. Her cheeks flushed a violent crimson, her expression contorted into a grin that would frighten any child. Memories of his father's obsession surged to the surface. Years ago, driven by the legend, his father had not only unearthed the cosmic cube, but also discovered a divine hammer that had descended from the heavens. Now, bound within the worn blue tome he carried, were precise coordinates pointing to the hammer's resting place, an artifact so powerful that none before had ever managed to lift it. Chapter 303, The Inhuman's Visit. Second update. A week later in the afternoon, Lucian apparated back to the school from the New York sanctum. Every day that week, he had made the trip to seek the Ancient One's guidance on time magic. The Ancient One, ever the laid-back mentor, spent his days teaching disciples and sipping tea. Unless there was a dimensional demon incursion, his students handled the mundane chores around Camartage, leaving Master to enjoy a leisurely pace. Even with the Ancient One's advice, time magic remained far more intricate than Lucian had imagined. Yet his sessions had already boosted his efficiency in studying the super magic fairy orb. Now he understood why Makarov had warned him that this branch of magic was notoriously difficult, and he couldn't help but admire the prodigious talents of those first-generation sorcerers who had pioneered such spells. He was still sorting through the day's lessons when Professor X's voice echoed in his mind. Lucian, an alien claiming to be an inhuman, says there's an emergency and insists on meeting you. Lucian slipped into the school's spacious conference room in an instant. Seated at the long table were Professor Xavier, Wolverine, and a woman whose hair seemed to sprout thorn-like vines. They looked up as he arrived. "What's happening?" Lucian asked, scanning the room. Professor Xavier tapped the woman gently on the shoulder. "This is Ophelia," he said. "She called earlier to apply for a teaching position, but she insisted she needed to speak with you immediately. She claims to be an inhuman." Lucian's eyes narrowed. "Inhumans who helped Hydra back in Washington," he said flatly. "I remember that. You ambushed us, almost got the jump on the entire team." Ophelia's thorny tendrils quivered at his accusation. "We didn't want to," she blurted. "Hydra held our families hostage. They threatened to kill them if we didn't cooperate. We had no choice." Wolverine grunted in the corner, but said nothing. Professor Xavier folded his hands, watching Lucian for his reaction. Lucian took a steady breath. He knew how easily hostages could be used as leverage, even more so against Inhumans, yet this was the first time anyone from their world had sought him out here. "All right," he said slowly. "Start from the beginning. Tell me exactly what Hydra's up to and why you need me." Lucian crossed the room to stand before the female Inhuman, his expression as cold and unreadable as marble. He folded his arms and waited a moment before speaking in a low, measured voice. "What brings you here today?" He scarcely cared whether Hydra harbored grudges against the Inhumans or whether the two factions were at war. As long as Hydra didn't come looking for him personally, he couldn't have cared less, even if they leveled the White House. He would rather devote every waking hour to mastering time magic than playing savior to squabbles that weren't his own. Charitable gestures and grand heroics were far below his ambitions. The Inhuman before him, eyes wide with urgency, swallowed. "My name is Reyna," she said. "My gift lets me glimpse fragments of the future. I've seen a catastrophe coming, one that will devastate both our people and your world. You're the only one who can stop it." Lucian raised an eyebrow. Reyna hurried on, her voice trembling now that she had his attention. "In the future I saw," she said, "Hydra's original sin, a power born of an ancient hammer, will unleash something far worse than any weapon they've ever wielded. Deep in the Pacific, in the Mariana Trench, lies a sleeping deity, the Great Serpent. When that creature awakens, its wrath will drown entire continents. We can't fend it off without you." Silence fell. Lucian's cold gaze fixed on her, but for the first time he felt a flicker of something else, curiosity, perhaps, or the faint stirrings of responsibility. The inhuman threat had never concerned him. Yet now, faced with the prospect of annihilation on a scale he had only glimpsed in nightmares, he realized his studies in time magic might be the world's last hope. Jiaying, leader of the Inhumans, met Lucian's gaze with steady resolve. "If you'll help us rescue our kin," she said, "every Inhuman here will enroll in your school and follow your orders." Lucian's expression was calm. He'd always believed that protecting superpowered individuals was nobler than Hydra's cruel ambition. Knowing this, Jiaying, who'd glimpsed the future in her visions, had quietly neutralized the Hydra agents among them and sent her own people to Lucian, hoping to use his promise as the catalyst that would finally break Hydra's grip. She handed him a datapad, then paused before speaking again. "There's one more thing, a warning from Original Sin." She hesitated. "She calls it the Great Catastrophe, the evil god Great Snake." Lucian arched an eyebrow. He recognized the name Original Sin from Zora's database, though he'd never met her. According to Zora's files, Original Sin was the accidental daughter of the Red Skull, born with a sliver of his enhanced DNA that made her slightly stronger than a normal human, but still powerless to rise within Hydra's ranks. As for this Great Snake, Lucian drew a complete blank. The only serpent he recalled was the solar beam creature from the King of Fighters circuit. "Show me everything you've got," he said, tapping the datapad. If Hydra had a supernatural weapon called Great Snake, he'd need every scrap of intelligence to stop it. Lucian knew he wielded enough power to destroy the world, but this sea serpent clearly didn't belong to the Marvel Universe's system, and that alone made it all the more dangerous. Rhina, the alien, claimed she'd seen fragments of its future attacks, and Lucian's psychic insight confirmed she wasn't lying. He'd been planning to let Hydra slide. After all, they weren't an immediate threat to him. Keeping them active was useful. They'd give the world's governments something else to worry about besides the Superpower Academy. But now he realized Hydra could open the door to even worse terrors, beings like this abyssal serpent dwelling in the ocean's darkest depths. Was it a projection of some demon god from another dimension? Whatever its origin, it was poised to unleash global catastrophe. He took a steadying breath. "All right," he said, meeting Lena's anxious gaze. "I'll rescue your family, but in return, you have to give me everything you can find about that snake, its origins, its powers, any weaknesses." Lena's relief was immediate, and after a moment's thought, Lucian nodded. He'd agreed to her terms. Now, it was time to bring down Hydra before it unleashed the world's next nightmare. Lucian stood in the command tent, restless. Rescuing the relatives Hydra had secreted away would be child's play. As soon as he had a name, his tracking spell would pinpoint their hiding places. What gnawed at him now was far more troubling, the origin of the serpent god Hydra worshipped. "No problem," Rena said briskly, eyes bright as she tapped at her holo display. "Jiaying, our leader, is assigned full-time to Baron Strutt's fortress. She's got her ear to the ground on Hydra's highest-level intelligence." She looked up, meeting Lucian's gaze. "Compile a full list of everyone Hydra's taken hostage. Once you've got it, summon Czar, your teleporter ally, and I'll meet you at the extraction point." Lucian nodded, reciting the names to Lena, who scribbled them down with lightning speed. Then he turned toward the rear of the tent, where Professor Gu Yai, Archmage of the New York Sanctuary, was poring over a stack of arcane tomes. "Master Lucian?" Gu Yai's dark eyes widened at the sight of him. "You've returned already?" Lucian allowed himself a thin smile. "I need your insight on something. Or rather, I need to speak with the Supreme Mage. There's a matter concerning that snake god only the highest council can unravel." As Reyna finished her preparations and Lena sealed the dossier of names, Lucian felt the familiar hum of anticipation in his veins. Hydra's captives would be freed soon enough, but first he had to confront the darkness at the heart of their faith. And for that, he needed answers only legends could provide. Lucian hesitated at the foot of the stairs. "Is she still inside?" he called up. The resident mage glanced down at him. "Once you leave, the Supreme Mage will return to Carmitage," he said. "If you truly wish to find her, head to the second floor. There's a space gate there that opens directly to Carmitage." "Very well," Lucian replied, steeling himself. He climbed the broad steps of the sanctuary's inner hall, every echoing footfall accompanied by the distant hum of arcane wards. On the second level, he found it exactly as the mage had described, an oval portal suspended in midair, its surface rippling like polished water. Only the most skilled of Carmitage's secret practitioners dared draw teleportation circles, spells that drained their very lifeblood. Long ago, the Ancient One had spared junior mages that ordeal by installing these space gates in every major sanctuary. A single step through, and even an apprentice could traverse half the world in an instant. Lucian paused before the gate's softly glowing frame, hand hovering over its cool glass-like edge. His heart pounded with both anticipation and dread. Beyond this threshold lay the answers he sought, and perhaps the confrontation he'd been dreading. Drawing a steadying breath, he stepped forward into the portal's pearlescent light and vanished. Chapter 304, God of Fear Cool, Update. Lucian paused outside the doorway to the second floor's artifact gallery and let out a low whistle. The Ancient One has amassed quite the collection over the years. He remembered Ancient One guiding him through this wing of the New York Sanctum a few days ago. Down here rested the Cloak of Levitation, which Dr. Strange now wore. Alongside it stood the Axe of Angarumus and the Icon Bell, legendary instruments capable of opening a tunnel between Earth and the Econ dimension. Nearby, the Black Mirror lay poised to peer into alternate realities, and the Pomgaria brazier shimmered with the power to breach Mephisto's domain in the Hell dimension. Lucian made his way to the very end of the hall, where several shimmering portals hovered in midair. He reached out and twisted the dial on the central doorway until the runes spelled Kamartaj. With a deep breath, he stepped through and instantly found himself amidst the snow-capped peaks near Kathmandu. He barely had time to take in the crisp mountain air before a familiar figure appeared. Modo, the gatekeeper of Kamartaj's Himalayan headquarters. The sorcerer's eyes widened. "Master Lucian, what brings you here?" Although Lucian had been studying magic in the New York Sanctum every day under Ancient One's guidance, this was his first visit to the ancient stronghold in the mountains. He straightened his robes and smiled. "I came to learn more. I have questions only Kamartaj can answer." Lucian's voice was steady yet urgent. "I have a matter of the highest importance for the Supreme Mage, one that concerns the safety of our entire world." Mordo's expression grew serious the moment he heard Lucian mention Earth's safety. Without a word, he swept Lucian along narrow corridors, past rows of study chambers, and out into the vast outer courtyard. Here, Supreme Mage Guyi was overseeing a group of newly enrolled mystic mages as they practiced elemental spells, their hands weaving arcs of fire and light in the dusk air. Spotting Lucian's arrival, Guyi set aside his staff. "Mordo? And you, what's the emergency?" Guyi's keen eyes flicked over Lucian, sensing the tension in his posture. Lucian drew a steadying breath and spoke without preamble. "Master Guyi, have you heard of the Great Serpent? Hydra's people report that they've released an ancient evil god, known as the Great Serpent, deep beneath the Mariana Trench in the Pacific." Guyi's pupils constricted. "Cool, the god of fear? That is troubling news indeed." Lucian nodded. "The reports say he's been sealed for centuries. If he's truly free, his power could spread terror across every corner of the world." Guyi's gaze hardened. "Is he one of the outer-dimensional demon gods?" "Not exactly." Guyi let his words hang for a moment. "Kul isn't bound by the usual dimensional laws. He predates many of our recorded pantheons. His essence is born of primordial fear itself, far more ancient and insidious than any demon we've faced." A hush fell over the courtyard as the newly minted mages sensed the gravity of the conversation. Flames flickered in their palms, but their eyes were fixed on the two masters. Lucian stepped forward. "Then how do we stop him? If Hydra has already broken his seal, we may have very little time before his influence spreads." Guyi studied the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight dimmed behind the towers. "We must gather our strongest wards and seek the Codex of Banesong. It holds the ritual powerful enough to bind even a god of fear. But first," he said, turning to Lucian, "we need more information, exactly how Hydra unleashed him, and whether any shards of that seal remain intact." Lucian nodded, resolve hardening his features. "I'll depart at once for the Mariana Trench. If there's any chance to recover those shards, I'll find it." Guyi raised his staff. Its crystal tip glowed with a pale blue light. "Go, Lucian. May the ancient mages watch over you, and may courage guide your heart." As Lucian prepared to leave, Mordo fell into step beside him. The two vanished into a vortex of shimmering magic, bound for the abyssal depths, and whatever terrors awaited them there. Lucian stared at the Ancient One in disbelief. "He's actually from the God Realm, Odin's older brother, the very father of the gods," the Ancient One said, shaking his head. "Kul is known as the god of fear," he continued. "After usurping the throne of the God Realm, he ruled as a tyrant. Odin rose against him, overthrew his reign, and sealed him in the Mariana Trench beneath Earth's Pacific Ocean." Lucian's brow furrowed. "Wait, didn't Odin seal away someone else too, his eldest daughter, Hela?" The Ancient One's eyes widened in surprise. "You know of her?" "Yes, Hela, the goddess of death, is indeed imprisoned on Earth, but not in the Pacific. Her prison lies in Norway." Lucian ran a hand through his hair. "Why Earth? Why lock them up here instead of your own realm?" A weary sigh escaped the Ancient One. "Because Earth sits at the heart of all worlds. It's the cradle of many primordial deities and serves as the universe's focal point. Its unique energies make it the perfect containment field for the most powerful beings." He paused, gazing off into the distance. "Across the cosmos there are countless worlds, civilizations, and gods, but none as special as Earth. Its mortal cultures may be young, but it has given birth to ancient powers. Gaia, Oshutu, Set, even Sithon, all trace their origins back to this planet. Lucian paused, staring out at the churning sky. Why is it always Earth these extra-dimensional demons pick on, instead of some other planet in the cosmos? Because only by seizing and consuming Earth can they gain a foothold to devour the entire universe, Guyi explained quietly. The hidden sorcerers of Kamar-Taj aren't merely safeguarding this world, they protect the whole of creation. It's a burden few can bear. Guyi folded his arms. That said, this is a matter of the Divine Realm's own. Kamar-Taj has no authority to interfere directly. You should reach out to Thor, the god of thunder. He's visiting your school, isn't he? Lucian nodded. You're right. We can't just barge in on someone else's family crisis. As Guyi spoke, Lucian suddenly understood the subtext. Yes, Kul, the god of fear, had been unleashed on Earth, but Kamar-Taj had no plans to confront him. Their claim of non-interference was nothing more than a diplomatic excuse. And yet, Lucian couldn't entirely fault them. During his recent studies of ancient magic, he'd unearthed fragments of this universe's history, shadows of past conflicts that made Kamar-Taj's caution all too understandable. Lucian stepped into the dimly lit chamber of Kamar-Taj, where ancient scrolls and carved symbols lined the walls. Above him, the lofty ceiling arched like the vault of some long-forgotten temple. Here, amid whispers of mystic power, he sought to understand the origins of the sanctum he now served. A single torch crackled, and a deep voice broke the silence. Kamar-Taj was founded in 5000 BC by Agamotto, the Ancient One began, though Lucian knew the story by heart. A mortal sorcerer of exceptional gift, Agamotto drove back a horde of interdimensional demons led by Dormammu's lieutenants. To guard Earth against future incursions, he erected 3 sanctums at the planet's most sacred sites, each a bastion against darkness. Lucian nodded, recalling how the sanctums had stood unyielding through millennia. Yet a question had always lingered. Why had Asgard, conqueror of realms, left Earth unprotected? According to Thor, the Ancient One continued, in 679 BC, Odin marshaled the armies of the god realm and subdued the 9 worlds woven into Yggdrasil. By then he stood as All-Father. He planted garrisons on every realm but ours, choosing instead to let humanity grow unaided. Lucian frowned. The frost giant realm lay under a fragile treaty, and the dark elf homeworld lay in ruin. Why had Earth alone escaped Asgardian occupation? Thor speculated it was the sanctums, the Ancient One said, that gave Odin pause. He understood that, on its home ground, the Sorcerer Supreme could match his own might. Whatever passed between them long ago remains untold, yet through that unspoken covenant, Earth was granted its hidden guardians. Lucian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of centuries settle around him. In that silent vow between gods and sorcerers, he found both purpose and promise. As long as Kamar-Taj endured, no demon, dimensional or divine, would claim the world he now defended. Lucian had long known that Kamar-Taj acknowledged Odin as the All-Father of the 9 realms, yet that title carried no authority on Earth. Strange's own caution around Thor and outright hostility toward Loki in the Sanctum Sanctorum proved that the mystic order recognized Asgard's existence, but refused to tolerate its chaos makers. By extension, the Ancient One and Odin must have crossed paths, though friendship would be too generous a word. On the surface, both Odin and the Ancient One present themselves as benevolent rulers, but each has a well-honed ruthlessness. Odin led brutal campaigns across the 9 realms, leaving untold thousands dead, and deliberately concealed his daughter Hela's very existence to protect his power. The Ancient One, for his part, turns a blind eye to massive casualties so long as his fundamental laws remain intact. His schemes to groom Stephen Strange as his successor cost many lives in secret battles and deadly loopholes. It strains credulity to believe the Ancient One lacked the power to save those sorcerers slain by Caecilius, or to subdue Caecilius outright. The truth is, he simply chose not to concern himself with Odin's dirty work. But Lucian's ambitions ran deeper than petty quarrels between gods and sorcerers. He nursed a single, burning purpose, to storm the throne of the 9 realms, strip Odin of his crown, and claim vengeance for every hidden atrocity. And if that meant returning to Asgard with blade in hand, then so be it. Lucian frowned as he reviewed the latest magical readings. The disruption rippling through the astral plane might scar the Earth's surface, but it would never be enough to tear the planet apart. Even so, he knew that as soon as the Ancient One joined forces with the mystic mage to confront Kul, Kamataki would pay a steep price. If a dimensional demon seizes this moment to slip through the veil, Lucian mused, we could find ourselves facing threats on two fronts. He glanced toward the window of the sanctum's upper chamber, where the faint glow of eldritch wards pulsed against the creeping twilight. He remembered the Chitauri invasion vividly. Back then, the Ancient One had hovered above the main sanctuary, single-handedly repelling those dark battalions that dared to assault the sanctum's gates. The earth itself was under siege, yet the Ancient One never diverted attention from guarding the sanctum. Lucian couldn't fault that decision. It had been the only way to keep the dimensional barriers intact, but this time, the stakes felt different. Even if Kul falls, Lucian sighed, Kamataki could be laid to waste. And if a demon lord slips past our defenses... He shook his head, pushing aside the dread creeping up his spine. He needed a plan, not just for Kul, but for every rift that threatened to tear open the sky. Lucian tapped his staff against the marble floor. I'll alert Wong and rally the others, he decided. We bolster the wards here, reinforce the Mystic Mage's circle, and keep the Sanctum's barriers primed. No back doors for any demon tonight. With that resolve stealing his heart, Lucian strode toward the chamber door. Whatever came next, he would be ready. Chapter 305, Heaven Hammer. Venerable Lucian stepped out of the New York sanctuary, his brow furrowed in thought. Should he wade into this conflict? I'll decide when the time comes, he muttered to himself. His decision would hinge on one simple question. What was in it for him? If the rewards proved substantial, he wouldn't hesitate to lend the realm of the gods his aid, just as he had done before. After all, Kul, brother of Odin, must be a fearsome opponent. Yet sealed for countless centuries and cut off from Asgard's power while stranded on Earth, Kul posed little immediate threat. Meanwhile, Lucian had been immersing himself in both temporal magic and alchemy. He'd even conceived a daring plan to lift the entire academy into the skies, using levitation spells, flight enchantments, and arcane airships. A steady supply of Uru metal would make that lofty vision a reality far sooner than anyone expected. Of course, circumstances could shift in an instant. Perhaps the opportunity to intervene would never present itself, or perhaps Odin himself would step forth, closing the window before Lucian could act. Either way, there was one task he could not delay, summoning Thor. With a flourish of his hand, Lucian traced a glowing rune in the air and spoke the name that echoed across realms. Thor Odinson, appear before me. Lucian cut through the crisp evening air, guided by the faint shimmer of his tracking spell, until he emerged onto the faculty dormitory lawns at NYU. Below him, Thor, ever the enthusiast, was on roller skates, gripping Mjolnir like a handrail. Beside him, Jane Foster teetered, laughter and nerves tangled on her lips as Thor patiently coached her through the basics. Lucian, what are you doing here? Thor called, surprise breaking across his face. Jane nearly wobbled out of control, but Thor caught her arm. Lucian landed lightly on the pavement and drew himself to his full height, expression grave. Thor, I've come with urgent news. Your Uncle Kul has shattered his seals and escaped. Uncle? Thor echoed, stunned. I didn't know I had an uncle. Lucian's gaze was steady. Odin bound Kul alongside Hela long ago, wiped him from all records. The magic has weakened, and now he's free. Thor's face darkened. He leaned toward Jane and murmured a few reassuring words, then straightened with resolve. Heimdall! The night air rippled, and the Bifrost Bridge materialized in a blaze of rainbow light, arching down onto the lawn. Thor placed a reassuring hand on Lucian's shoulder. Stay safe, my friend. I must return to Asgard at once and alert Father. Lucian inclined his head. Be swift, Prince of Thunder. With a final flash of color, Thor and Jane were gone, the rainbow dissolving into the star-speckled sky. Lucian stood alone, the weight of Kul's escape pressing on his mind. If Kul had indeed broken free, the fate of both Asgard and Midgard might be about to change forever. Don't worry, the domain of the gods will never abandon Kul, Thor declared, plunging into the rainbow bridge and disappearing in a flash of light. Moments later, Lucian apparated back to the school. In the conference room, Reyna sat with another Inhuman, a pale, eyeless man whose aura hinted at teleportation powers. Lucian slipped inside and closed the doors behind him. "Is the list ready?" he asked. Reyna slid a single page across the table. Every line was a name. Relatives of Inhumans. Hydra had kidnapped and hidden in secret bases around the globe. Headquarters just sent an update. The evil god known as the Great Snake has conjured 7 new hammers. Anyone who wields one gains the same overwhelming power as the original Sin Hammer, but they're bound to his will. Several Hydra commanders have already defected to him in exchange for that power. Their next target appears to be the White House. Lucian's pulse quickened. An attack on the White House? Reyna nodded gravely. That's the plan. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. Why would Kull, or the Great Snake, strike at the heart of the U.S. government? Was this a bid for our global domination? Let them try, Lucian thought. As long as the Academy remained untouched, he would bide his time. He refused to make a move until Thor returned with more intelligence. He isn't a Superman. He can't sprint around the globe saving people from every natural or man-made disaster. Countless lives are lost every day. He's no saint. Besides, human nature is complicated. Even the kindest gesture can backfire, and some will only blame you for their misfortune. He refuses to be that fallen hero. If he ever intervenes, he'll wait until people are truly desperate, then step in as their savior, claim their gratitude, and secure the greatest advantage for himself. Call him cynical if you like, but he believes that if you're going to be good, you must be shrewd about it. Otherwise, you end up thankless, or worse. Better to be bad and smart. Do you know who he entrusted the 8 hammers to? Gordon, the eyeless man, asked. Lucian frowned. Original Sin, Baron Zemo, Baron Strat, Madam Hydra, Hive, and 3 operatives who aren't affiliated with Hydra. Their leader described them like this. One wears a specialized Black Panther mask, another has blue skin and spends most of his time submerged in water, and the third can generate and control flames. Lucian studied the lineup. He recognized the first 5 figures immediately, but the last 3 left him guessing. The warrior clad in a Black Panther helmet had to be Wakanda's champion, but was it King T'Challa or his father, the Elder King T'Chaka? Both still lived in this timeline. Beside him stood a blue-skinned fighter clearly at ease in water. Atlantis came to mind, and with it the name Namor, but Lucian couldn't be certain it was the Submariner. Finally, a figure wreathed in living flame shifted restlessly. No obvious hero sprang to mind, especially since he'd yet to encounter the Fantastic Four in this world. Lucian's thoughts drifted to Kull's Skyhammer. In the wrong hands, the hammer would bend to the snake demon's will, but even fully empowered it couldn't match Thor and posed no real threat to him. His greater concern was the hulking Kull himself. Rescue the civilians first, he told his eyeless companion. He tapped the datapad in his hand, bringing up the list of heroes and innocents still trapped. From here on, we split into 2 teams. I'll move down this list one by one, find them, free them, and get them to safety. With that, Lucian gave a curt nod and vanished into the fray. Lucian, you'll be responsible for getting your leader and every Inhuman to the school, Gordon said, urgency in his voice. Since the Inhumans had just provided invaluable intelligence and agreed to cooperate, Gordon was bound to protect them. But they're scattered across the globe, he went on, brow furrowed. Can you reach them all in time? Anxious lines formed around Gordon's eyes. Once Hydra moves, they'll discover the trail, and if Lucian can't extract the Inhumans before then, Hydra will slaughter them without mercy. Lucian offered a calm smile. Don't worry, we have enough time, but not yet. First, I'll locate each of them. Then, at the same moment, we'll all teleport to the school. Hydra won't even have a chance to react. Gordon paused, realization dawning. Teleportation wasn't his gift alone. Lucian could do it too. He nodded, relief flooding his face. Understood? Anything you need from me? Wolverine flexed his claws eagerly, ready to spring into action. Lucian raised a hand to forestall him. Not right now, but for the next 2 days, all classes are suspended. Notify everyone to gather in the main hall at dawn. We move as one. Lucian frowned as he considered the stakes. When Thor returns, we could be facing a brutal showdown. He suspected that Thor might summon the host of the Aesir from Asgard to subdue Kull on Earth. Yet Odin himself would almost certainly remain in the 9 realms, leaving Thor to confront Kull and his 8 legendary Sky Hammer Masters alone. Even a god of Thor's strength might struggle against such a fearsome alliance. If the battle tipped in Cole's favor, Lucian and his allies would have no choice but to mount a desperate rescue mission. High above the school grounds, the phantom apparition materialized. At first, it hovered unseen in the clouds. Then, with a sudden ripple of magic, it began its animagus transformation. Within seconds, the shadowy figure coalesced into a titanic dragon, its wings glittering like molten gold against the moonlit sky. Chapter 306, Fear Arrives, Second Update. Lucian's animagus transformation into a colossal dragon had completely overhauled his capabilities. His raw strength soared, and his magical power shattered the 1,000-level ceiling. In this draconic form, every spell he cast carried far greater force. His apparition range now encompassed the entire globe, and his flight speed was truly legendary. Using a specialized tracking charm, he could pinpoint the scattered Inhumans wherever they hid. Then, at a thought, he'd apparate straight to their side and whisk them away. With a mighty ripple of his wings, the air thundered around him as Lucian caught sight of the glowing golden arrow, a beacon pointing the way, and vanished in a heartbeat. Frankly, even if he set his magic aside, his sheer size and velocity would let him overpower any adversary he cared to fight. By fusing the traits of the three-world dragons, Lucian had become a nearly indestructible force. He estimated that not even a direct nuclear strike could bring him down. It was this unshakable confidence, this near invulnerability, that made him believe he finally stood a real chance against Cole. Lucian could hardly believe how far he'd come. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined he'd stand toe-to-toe with Cole. Yet here he was, after racing across continents, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Britain, France, Portugal, in a matter of hours, pinpointing the hidden locations of 30 Inhuman families. He raced back to the school and briefed Gordon. In an instant, they sprang into action. Gordon vanished and reappeared inside Baron Strat's fortress, snatching Jiaying, the Inhuman leader, from her captors. With Jiaying safely in tow, he returned to the designated rendezvous point, the courtyard they'd nicknamed the Future, and began ushering rescued Inhumans and their relatives through a hidden tunnel, one group at a time. Meanwhile, Lucian materialized undetected at each of the marked sites. He slipped the prisoners into secure transport crates without alerting a single Hydra sentry. In under 10 minutes, over 100 Inhumans and their family members stood assembled on the school's athletic field. Lucian surveyed the anxious faces, muddy uniforms, and hopeful eyes. He shared Gordon's unspoken thought. They were going to need a lot more space. Lucian surveyed the bustling corridors of the academy and frowned. Though he could rely on his traceless expansion spell to stretch the hidden vault's dimensions, he still couldn't conjure entire buildings out of thin air. In the past weeks, the school had welcomed dozens of superpowered recruits and their families, and dorm space was nearly maxed out. More than 100 people had arrived at once, enough to strain even the vault's extra rooms. But Lucian already had a solution. With the mountain translocation spell, he would uproot a nearby residential complex and deliver it onto the academy grounds. Instantly, hundreds of beds, baths, and living rooms would materialize as dormitories, room enough for every newly arrived family. As he finalized the incantation in his mind, a small delegation of Inhumans approached, led by Jiaying. Her eyes glistened with gratitude, and her young daughter Daisy clutched her hand. Behind them, freed relatives embraced their fellow tribesmen, tears mingling with laughter at long-awaited reunions. Jiaying bowed deeply. "Master Lucian, we are in your debt for rescuing our people. From this day forward, the Inhumans pledge our loyalty to you." Lucian shook his head, offering a gentle smile. "No need for that. I'm not Hydra. I won't coerce anyone into servitude. This academy exists to welcome superpowered individuals and their families. If you wish, Jiaying, you and your people can live here as faculty, and your children can attend classes alongside everyone else." Relief flooded Jiaying's face. Around them, the murmurs of hope grew louder. Thanks to Lucian's foresight and a little well-placed magic, the academy's walls were about to expand in more ways than one. Lucian stood in Headmaster Arden's Irelet study, listening intently as the old sorcerer leaned forward across his carved oak desk. "If the academy ever comes under threat," Arden said, "you are free to decide whether or not to intervene." Lucian nodded. Arden trusted that once the Inhumans had a chance to settle into the Superpower Academy, they would blend in naturally. After all, where else in the world could they live so safely? There was no need for heavy-handed oversight. On the contrary, welcoming the Inhumans had only strengthened the school. With their unique gifts on the roster, Arden could tackle any emerging danger on his own terms and devote more of his own time to mastering advanced magic. Far from the peace of the academy, Baron Strat pounded the stone floor of Hydra's Sokovian stronghold. Divinely empowered, his frame had swollen to twice its normal size, veins pulsing with raw power. Clutching his colossal warhammer, he brought it down so hard that the ground ruptured in a jagged crater. "They actually escaped?" he roared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. Hydra agents trembled under his glare as they reported the Inhumans' flight. Strat's fury burned bright, but he held his command. He would not dispatch his forces on a hasty manhunt. There were greater ambitions to fulfill first, uniting Earth with the Divine Realm under his Lord's banner. Only once that conquest was complete would he turn his full wrath on those who had betrayed him. "Strat, the Lord has summoned us. Prepare to move out." Baron Zemo strode into the chamber, another mighty hammer slung across his back. At his entrance, Strat's eyes lit with fanatical zeal. He snapped to attention and cried, "Great Lord, God of Fear, Strat answers your call." 30 minutes later, the vast central square of the base thrummed with anticipation. 8 Skyhammer Venerables stood shoulder to shoulder, each gripping a colossal warhammer. Behind them stretched battalions of Hydra soldiers, their formations interspersed with the faction's most advanced armor and armaments. Heavy tanks, bomb launchers, mechanized assault suits, and even gargantuan war mechs newly unveiled for this day. At the head of this formidable display stood Kull, the god of fear and elder brother of Odin. Centuries of sealing had aged him beyond his divine kin. His hair and beard were now pure white, flowing almost to the ground, and in his hand he bore a dark, rune-etched scepter. His gaze swept over the assembled venerables and troops, and when he spoke, his ancient voice rolled across the square like distant thunder, arresting every heart and stirring the air with dread and expectation. "Children, lend me your ears. Tonight, we will sow terror in every corner of the world, so that all shall tremble at my name." With that command, Lucian brought his scepter down on the earth. A pulse of divine energy rippled across Sokovia. The ground shuddered, fissures spidering outward before columns of rock and soil peeled skyward. As the land itself began to lift, great towers and humble dwellings alike collapsed in ruins, burying thousands beneath the rubble, and everywhere, raw fear took root. Lucian inhaled deeply. The palpable dread around him flowed into his chest, and he felt the wounds of age and weariness knit themselves closed. Skin smoothed, hair darkened, and his stooped figure straightened into that of a majestic, middle-aged sovereign. This was his dark gift, to consume terror, to heal his flesh, to forge his godlike power anew. "Onward!" he cried. At his gesture, the floating continent of Sokovia, escorted by the 8 Skyhammer Masters and legions of the Hydra army, turned westward and soared across the Atlantic. According to the intelligence provided by Original Sin, the United States now stood preeminent among mortal nations. Washington, D.C., its heart, would be their first mark. With the capital's fall, Lucian vowed, despair would sweep the globe, and every soul would kneel before him. Lucian stood atop the cliff's edge, the wind whipping through his hair as he gazed out over the sprawling mortal realm below. He had learned long ago that the emotions of humanity, particularly their fear, were a potent source of power. If he could channel and consume every trembling heartbeat across the world, his strength would surge beyond anything Odin could imagine. Only with that immense reservoir of dread at his command could Lucian mount a true counterattack on the divine realm. Odin's mastery there granted him unnatural advantages, bolstering his divine might until it was all but unrivaled. Lucian had once been the supreme ruler of the gods, but his throne had been stolen by the usurper's treachery. Now standing alone where the mortal winds converged, he vowed to reclaim what was rightfully his. "Odin," Lucian whispered, eyes blazing with hatred, "you traitor who stole my crown. I swear on the bones of the fallen, I will see you stripped of all you've stolen. I will end you and your kin, and I will rise again as the true lord of the divine realm." He lifted his arms, palms glowing with a cold, silvery light. Across the world, in every dark alley and every silent wood, mortals shivered as an unseen chill brushed against their hearts. And with each tiny gasp of terror, Lucian drew in their fear, weaving it into his own inexorable power. Far above, the gates of the divine realm trembled. Soon, Odin would know the price of betrayal. Author's note: Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone. I had some unexpected guests this afternoon, so I'm posting this chapter a bit early and will follow up with a second update soon. Thank you all for reading. Chapter 307, The Disappearance of Senior Government Officials, Update 1. Fitz, have you pinpointed the whereabouts of the 7 hammers yet? Director Coulson asked, his gaze fixed on Dr. Leo Fitz in the Technology Division. Since the Insight Project debacle, S.H.I.E.L.D. had emerged victorious, largely thanks to Lucian, but its reputation lay in tatters and its resources had been slashed. Even so, a lean camel remains larger than most horses. S.H.I.E.L.D. had once been the world's premier defense agency, and even a skeleton crew with salvage technology still outmatched any ordinary organization. Realizing S.H.I.E.L.D.'s unique capabilities, the U.S. government moved in, assumed control, and provided the necessary funding. Today, S.H.I.E.L.D. operates alongside the CIA and FBI as a domestic intelligence service, its mission redefined, but no less critical. Where the CIA focuses on collecting political, cultural, and technological intelligence through both overt and covert means, from foreign governments, corporations, and individuals, S.H.I.E.L.D. manages the specialized threats that fall outside traditional agencies' purview. But first things first, Fitz's next words would tell them if the 7 hammers were within reach or lost once more. In the United States, the FBI handles counterterrorism, counterespionage, and a host of other criminal investigations. Over 200 federal offenses fall under its jurisdiction. S.H.I.E.L.D., on the other hand, now manages all superhuman and supernatural incidents nationwide and serves as the government's liaison to the Superpower Academy, a volatile institution still regarded by Washington as a ticking time bomb. No formal strategy has yet been agreed upon for dealing with it. Just a week ago, SWORD, the agency charged with monitoring extraterrestrial threats, detected 7 hammer-like objects of unmistakably alien design entering Earth's atmosphere. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, S.H.I.E.L.D. took command of the operation, dispatching teams to track each hammer's trajectory and evaluate any potential danger. Later, in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s operations center, Lucian stood before a bank of monitors. Using SWORD's readings on the hammer's unique energy signatures, I designed a specialized tracking device, he explained, tapping at the touchscreen. I integrated it into our satellite network and cross-referenced it with ground-based radar. Within hours, we'd pinpointed every landing site. He paused, eyes flicking from one coordinate display to the next. Now we know exactly where to send our teams. Fitz's fingers danced over the radar console, the display flickering with concentric blips. Besides the 7 hammers we've been monitoring, I've detected an 8th, he announced, voice low but urgent. Its energy signature matches the others, which means it probably landed on Earth ages ago. He zoomed in on the latest readings. This 8th hammer is in Sokovia. 4 of the alien origin hammers initially struck Sokovia, coinciding almost exactly with this one's coordinates. The remaining 3 fell elsewhere, one in Wakanda, one in the Mediterranean off Spain, and one near Miami, Florida. Yet somehow all 3 have now converged on Sokovia. Coulson's jaw tightened. He studied the readout, then looked up, eyes shadowed with concern. Sokovia, he repeated. That can't be a coincidence. Hydra must be involved. Pierce may be gone, but Hydra's global network remained a threat. Recent intelligence from captured agents confirmed multiple bases worldwide and a significant stronghold in Sokovia. 8 powerful hammers, all in Hydra territory? It was too neatly arranged to be accidental. Coulson knew they were staring down something far bigger than before. Director Coulson slammed his fist on the table. We're heading to Sokovia, he announced. May, get the combat team assembled. Half an hour tops. Director, urgent message. A S.H.I.E.L.D. agent burst into the operations center. What is it? The agent gulped. Sokovia, it's airborne. It's hurtling straight for Washington. Coulson's eyes widened. Fitz, bring up SAT, leap feed, now. On the big screen, Fitz's fingers flew over the console. A grainy, high-altitude shot of Sokovia materialized, the entire city soaring through the clouds at breakneck speed. In a closer view, 8 armored figures, each wielding a colossal hammer, stood on the city's ramparts. Behind them, a massive, serpentine creature coiled among ranks of Hydra soldiers. Coulson rubbed his forehead. Contact the Secretary of Defense. Launch every available missile battery against that city, and get me Principal Lucian of the Superpower Academy. We're going to need his help. Across the sky, the serpent, its scales gleaming like burnished steel, caught the incoming radar blips and laughed, a low, contemptuous hiss. High above, missiles streaked toward Sokovia, but the great beast only narrowed its reptilian eyes in amusement. He didn't even have to lift a finger. A simple gesture from him, and the 8 Skyhammer Venerables behind him sprang into action. Mortal technology is crude, worse than that of the long-extinct Dark Elves. Killian, take care of it. My honor, great Lord God, came the reply. Aldrecki Killian, a broad-shouldered, suit-clad man, erupted in flames the moment he spoke. He swung his red-hot hammer, rocketed into the air, and spun in a fiery whirlwind that obliterated every incoming missile in an instant. Killian's power was no accident. As one of the architects of the desperate virus, he was already beyond ordinary human might. But a week ago, fate intervened. A flaming warhammer appeared before him, and the instant he grasped its handle, his virus-enhanced body was transfigured into that of a god. Now his sole purpose was to pursue and assist his master, Kul, the god of fear. For Aldrecki Killian, the great Lord God was the only truth. Lucian hovered above the capital, his breath calm despite the chaos below. He could sense every ounce of fear in the missiles sent to bring him down, and he drew power from it, his strength surging once more. With a subtle gesture, he urged Sokovia's engines forward, launching the floating city faster than ever before. Before the second wave of missiles could reach him, Sokovia loomed directly over the White House. Lucian's lips curled in a cruel smile. Poor mortals, he whispered, prepare to know true terror. He thrust his obsidian scepter into the cloud-choked sky. Then, with a sudden heave, he drove it earthward. The entire city of Sokovia came crashing down. Boom! The blast rocked the mall. Inside the West Wing, the President, Vice President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and every senior official in their emergency briefing were swallowed by rubble, obliterated in an instant. Across the surrounding blocks, concrete and steel buckled under Sokovia's weight, sending shockwaves of panic through Washington. Where fear blossomed, Lucian drank deeply. His muscles rippled, his aura flared, and he laughed as terror rippled outward like a shockwave. My children, he called, voice echoing across the ruined skyline, go forth and sow fear. Make every corner of this world tremble before me. This is only the beginning. Under Kul's command, the 8 Skyhammer Masters led their Hydra battalions in a relentless charge against the incoming forces, turning Washington into a scene of utter devastation. Soldiers tore through the streets, toppling buildings, cutting down anyone who stood in their path, and spreading chaos at every corner. Live broadcasts from major networks captured every atrocity in gruesome detail. Anchors and reporters, hungry for shocking footage, could barely bring themselves to script the word death. Yet paradoxically, they were entirely safe. Kul had explicitly ordered his troops to leave journalists untouched. He wanted their cameras rolling, broadcasting fear into every home and magnifying the horror he had unleashed. Chapter 308, The Divine Realm Army Arrives on Earth. All across the globe, people stared in horror at their television screens. Armies armed with the most advanced weapons fell like chaff before the Hydra brood, led by the 8 Skyhammer Venerables. Tank columns were incinerated in seconds. Fighter jets were torn from the sky before they could fire a shot. Even the formidable U.S. Army, backed by every shield asset, was crushed as easily as kittens underfoot. Whispers spread in every city. Is this the end of the world? Will our hometowns become the next Washington, turned into smoldering ruins? Every scream, every cry of despair, fed the power of Kul, the so-called god of fear. He stood at the center of the devastation, drawing on humanity's terror like a vampiric storm. With every life he shattered, his strength grew, an unstoppable force unless someone dared to stand against him. At the SHIELD headquarters in New York, Agent Phil Coulson refused to believe they were powerless. He had watched the live feed of Washington's collapse in stunned silence, and he knew ordinary soldiers, no matter how well trained, could never repel the 8 Sky Hammer Venerables and their nightmarish legions. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s experimental weapons were already depleted. Their last hope lay with Lucian Rhodes. Coulson activated the secure line. "Lucian," he said, voice tight with urgency, "we need you. You and your school's students are our only chance. Name your price. S.H.I.E.L.D. will make it happen." He paused, swallowing hard. "The Divine Realm Army. It's on its way to Earth, but they won't arrive in time. You're our only hope of holding the line until they do." Across the city, Lucian felt the message cut through him like a hammer blow. The world was collapsing under a tyrant's command. Now it was up to him, and those he had trained, to rally the last flicker of resistance and stand firm against the darkness. Lucian sat in the Institute strategy room, flanked by Professor X and the other instructors, eyes glued to the live feed from Washington, D.C. With most of the nation's leaders already fallen, the burden of command had effectively passed to him, Lucian, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. As long as he was willing to act, he could actually uphold nearly every promise he'd made. His phone buzzed. Agent Coulson's calm voice came through the receiver. "Director, with Asgard's enemy loose on Earth, what support can we expect?" Lucian leaned forward, his face set. "Don't worry, Coulson. The god of fear was born in Asgard. Loki's threat will be answered there, too. I've already informed Thor. He's returned to Asgard to muster the armies. They'll be here any minute." Before hanging up, Lucian allowed himself a moment's reflection on the catastrophe in Sokovia. In this world, there had been no Ultron uprising, but something far worse. Kull the Conqueror had laid waste to the city, and the death toll was staggering beyond anything humanity had ever suffered. At that instant, the big screen crackled with static. Everyone in the room held their breath as a column of multicolored light descended over the ruined capital. Then, cutting through the haze, came Thor himself, in gleaming armor, Mjolnir in hand, flanked by the Warriors 3 and the warrior goddess Sif. Behind them stretched row upon row of golden-armored Asgardian soldiers, their war drums echoing across the shattered city. Professor X allowed himself a small, relieved smile. Lucian closed his eyes briefly, and then opened them, determination blazing. "There," he said quietly. "Relief has arrived." Chapter 7. The God of Fear. The Earth is not so easily destroyed. But our capital won't stand for long. Kull's voice crackled through the communication link, calm yet menacing. He seemed entirely unfazed as towering monuments in Washington, D.C. trembled behind him. Phil Coulson ended the call and sank into his chair, rubbing his aching temples. The array of monitors before him glowed with scattered video feeds of Kull's arrival on the mall. Every second that passed brought the God of Fear closer to the map, the heart of human power. Coulson's hope lay with Lucian's assurance that Thor and the God Realm's forces could hold the line. He keyed his comms. "All teams, prepare to deploy. If Thor can't contain him, we move in immediately." Lucian stood in the dimly lit training hall, the assembled instructors waiting for orders. He felt a chill at how deliberate Kull's attack was. This wasn't a random rampage, but a carefully crafted campaign. He needed answers. "Get ready," Lucian said, voice low and urgent. Before anyone could respond, he vanished in a ripple of blue light. Moments later, Lucian found himself in the sanctum's tranquil atrium, where Wong stood watch over ancient relics. Lucian approached swiftly. "Kull intends to raise our cities one by one to harvest fear. He hasn't even mentioned returning to the God Realm. What's his endgame?" Wong studied him with calm eyes. "Kull is the primordial god of fear. Each tremor in a human heart strengthens him. He's here to amplify our terror until we submit, then he will rule us from within." Lucian's jaw clenched. If he captures our leader's resolve, the world will fall without a single sword passing between nations. A soft rustle announced the Ancient One's arrival. Draped in robes that shimmered like the night sky, she regarded Lucian with ageless wisdom. "The God of Fear has returned," she said quietly. "He will march on every capital until humanity bows. His power grows with each whisper of dread. You must fight him on 2 fronts, alongside Thor in Washington, and within yourselves, mastering your own fear." Lucian bowed respectfully. "I understand. We'll hold the line in D.C., and we'll teach every person here how to stand firm in the face of terror." The Ancient One nodded once. "Then go. Gather our allies and prepare. The true battle begins in every human heart." As Lucian stepped back through the portal, thunder rolled overhead. Far on the mall, Cole's cold laughter echoed, a harbinger of the fear yet to come. And on that trembling ground, Earth's heroes readied themselves for the fight of their lives. Lucian's shoulders sagged with relief. So once his power is restored, he'll leave Earth? We don't have to worry about him anymore. In the New York sanctum, the Ancient One had already sensed his doubts, and she lowered her voice to reassure him. Lucian's brow furrowed as he absorbed her words, then he straightened. Does he have any weaknesses? Lucian had no illusions. Odin still hadn't set foot on Earth. After all, Thor's chances against Cole weren't exactly high, and that meant the fight could fall to them. Defeating Cole would be nothing less than saving the world. Odin would owe them a favor. Every human life would be in their debt, and the Superpower Academy would gain immeasurable prestige. Yet if they waited until everyone was terrified, Cole's power would swell beyond measure. They needed an edge now. There is a weakness, the Ancient One said, her eyes glimmering with quiet confidence. She rose from her meditation cushion, her cloak rippling like a ripple on still water. Cole draws his strength from fear. His very existence feeds on it. Starve him of that fear. If people refuse to cower, if he begins to fear his own shadow, his power will falter. Lucian met her gaze, determination lighting his features. He already felt a plan taking shape. With fear stripped away, even the mightiest of enemies could be undone. Legend holds that Odin was able to defeat and seal away Cole because he felt no fear of him. Fear, after all, is what lets such creatures feed on our strength. That makes sense, Lucian said, nodding thoughtfully at the Ancient One's words. You're welcome, she replied with a faint smile. Now you know how to stand against him. Grateful for the insight, Lucian bowed once more. Thank you, Master Ancient One. Before dawn's first light, he returned to school, his mind buzzing with the new knowledge. But as he walked the familiar hallways, a nagging doubt crept in. Why does it feel like I've been played? He wondered. It wasn't that the Ancient One's information was false. Far from it. She had clearly studied Cole's strengths and weaknesses in meticulous detail, and yet she claimed she would not involve herself in Asgard's internal affairs or directly oppose Cole's return. If she truly had no intention of intervening, why would she know so much? Why point him toward Odin's old strategy rather than simply handling the threat herself? Lucian couldn't shake the suspicion that the Ancient One had a hidden agenda. She had given him the tool he needed to save the world, but in doing so, she'd made him the only one capable of wielding it. It was almost as if she wanted to watch from the sidelines, letting him shoulder the burden of this cosmic crisis alone. Shaking off the doubt, Lucian squared his shoulders. No matter her reasons, he now held the key to stopping Cole. And he would use it, if only to prove to himself that he wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. Lucian shrugged and turned away from the screen. Forget it. It doesn't matter what she does, as long as I get what I need. In the end, he told himself, it really wasn't worth fussing over. Whether he was being used or merely a tool made no difference, so long as he reaped the rewards. In a world of power struggles, even the strongest could be exploited by someone stronger. And Lucian had never been one to worry about pride. Being taken advantage of didn't humiliate him. It simply meant there was another fight to be won. On the TV, the battle raged in full fury. Thor had yet to land a blow on Cole's forces, and already the two Skyhammer Lords had him on the defensive. The three Immortal Palace champions and the goddess Sif had managed to halt only one Hammer Lord, while the remaining five had rallied the Hydra brood and swept through God's Domain's army like a tide of iron and flame. Professor Xavier is holding the mansion, Lucian reported calmly. The rest of you, get in my box. We're going to give the battlefield a hand. He produced the compact, rune-etched container from his coat and cracked it open. Inside, Logan, Captain Steve Rogers, and Dr. Bruce Banner waited, their expressions grim but determined. With a flick of his wrist, Lucian sealed the lid, and in an instant they vanished, bound for the front lines. Bruce Banner, recently appointed instructor of superhuman tactics, and the inhuman operative Daisy, materialized in the night sky over New York City. They floated there, motionless and silent. Banner pressed his thumb to his temple, and in an instant, both of them vanished. Banner cloaked by his invisibility protocol, Daisy concealed by her inhuman camouflage. Far to the east, atop the tallest spire still standing in war-torn Sokovia City, Kull watched. Below him, two of his Skyhammer lieutenants battered Thor Odinson without mercy. Kull's lips curled into a cruel smile as he spoke into the wind. "Thor Odinson," he called, his tone laced with disdain. "It seems your father, my despicable brother, lacks the courage to leave Asgard and face me here. Excellent. When the time is ripe, I will return to the realm of the gods, rip his head from his shoulders with my own hand, and suspend it from the branches of the world tree." Thor's roar shook the sky. "You will not insult the All-Father." He slammed Mjolnir into the air, summoning a crackling storm that pinned the two Skyhammer lords in place. With a fierce swing, he drove the hammer straight at Kull, only for Kull to unleash twin beams of divine light from his eyes, sending Thor crashing backwards. "Your so-called All-Father is a usurper," Kull taunted as Thor skidded to a halt. "I am the true progenitor of the gods, the real Lord of Asgard." From above, Tony Stark in his gleaming golden armor swooped in, catching Thor before he hit the ground. Moments ago, he'd seen the chaos erupting over Washington on the news feed and raced here at full throttle. "You all right, big guy?" he asked, brushing off the worst of the blow. He checked Thor's chest, where Kull's celestial blast had struck, and watched the wound knit itself closed. "Lucky for you, it's nothing but a scratch." Thor shook his head clear and grunted. "Thanks, Stark." Stark followed his gaze back to Kull. "And you, Mr. Drama King, ever heard of manners? You look like you could use a lesson in humble pie." Saul, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. "Actually, Kull's father is my grandfather, which makes Kull my uncle." Tony blinked. "Seriously, why does your family keep spawning these lunatics?" Thor's jaw tightened as Loki sneered beside him. "Last time it was your brother, now it's your uncle. And don't forget," Loki added with a cruel twist of his lips, "he was adopted, just an accident." Thor glanced over at the Lords of Skyhammer arrayed behind him. "We don't have time for this," he growled. "We need a plan, right now." Tony Stark stepped forward, calm as ever. "Fine, one target each." With that, Uru-forged claws slid from his gauntlet, and a gleaming divine laser cannon unfolded on his back. Before either of them could strike, a roar split the air. A pillar of flame shot skyward, and through the blaze came Killian, brandishing a massive red hammer. He tore past the stunned divine soldiers and charged at Tony, eyes blazing. "Tony Stark," he bellowed, voice trembling with rage. "You sorry excuse for a man. I'll make you pay for every shred of humiliation you threw at me." Tony raised his claws in defense. "I've never met you," he shot back, "but if it's a fight you want." Clang! Killian swung his hammer in a furious arc. Tony dodged, then countered, letting loose a searing beam of light. Thor pivoted on his heel, hammer at the ready, once more shouldering the burden of facing two heavenly hammer masters at once. They might have neutralized one foe, but in the gods' domain, the odds were still stacked against them. 4 more rolling juggernauts of Uru and divine might remained on the field, each rivaling the strength of gods, and all of them were closing in fast. Thor slammed his hammer into the ground, sending shockwaves rippling outward. Tony's claws flared, illuminating the battlefield in a fierce blue glow. Side by side, they braced for the coming storm. Suddenly, a sleek spacecraft tore through the smoke-choked sky above the battlefield. From its open hatch leapt a lone warrior clad in the Black Panther suit, flanked by a dozen bald, spear-bearing female guards. They landed with perfect synchronicity, their gaze fixed on the other Black Panther before them, Lord Skyhammer, who stood grimly clutching Kull's ebony hammer. "Father, fight it!" the younger Panther cried out. In that instant, it became clear. The venerable T'Chaka had fallen under Kull's spell when the sorcerer claimed the Black Hammer. His son, T'Challa, had raced to the front lines with his personal guard, determined to free his father from Kull's control and restore his sanity. With T'Chaka rescued, yet another Lord of the Heavenly Hammer was reclaimed, and the entire battlefield at last seemed to draw a steadier breath. But Kull, the most fearsome power of all, had not yet revealed his full might. He surveyed the newly stabilized armies with cold amusement. "Futile mortals," he purred, "let me show you true despair." With a contemptuous wave of his scepter, Kull unleashed a ripple of pure dread. It washed over the ranks of the Hydra warriors, warriors who, had it not been for the intervention of the celestial lords, would already have been crushed beneath the might of the divine army. As fear took hold, the final, decisive clash loomed on the horizon. The Hydra soldiers, infused with Kull's fear, convulsed in unison. Their features contorted into twisted masks of terror as their bodies swelled and warped. Serpentine scales erupted across flesh that rippled with unholy strength. In an instant, the fragile balance of the battlefield shattered, and the Divine Realm's army began to crack. High above the chaos, Lucian hovered, wind whirling at his back. He tightened his grip on the staff in his hand. "Now," he whispered, "it's time." But something made him pause. A shiver ran down his spine. He scanned the sky, then blinked in disbelief. A jagged tear split the heavens. From it strode Loki, clad in emerald and gold, a crown resting on his brow. Towering frost giants fanned out behind him like sentinels carved from ice. Loki's laughter rang out, clear and triumphant. "Humble mortals," he proclaimed, voice carrying across the field, "your savior has arrived." Thor, locked in a savage duel with two Skyhammer lords, froze mid-swing. His hammer hovered inches from its mark as he stared astonished. "Loki," he managed. With a sly grin, the trickster god spread his arms. "Surprised?" he mocked. "I didn't just escape my prison. I marched on Jotunheim and bent its frost giants to my will. From this day on, let the All-Father know, I am his most indispensable son." Loki swept his arm toward Kull with a broad grin, giving the frost giant's waist a triumphant squeeze. "My brave warriors, seize him." After his last scheme collapsed, and he found himself locked in a celestial prison, Loki's fortunes changed when he crossed paths with Lorelei, an enchantress of irresistible charm. Between her beguiling spells and his cunning, they bewitched the divine guards, coaxed open the cell door, and slipped out of Asgard unnoticed. Knowing they dared not provoke Odin's wrath, they fled instead to Jotunheim, where the death of King Laufey had thrown the frost giants into chaos. Armed with the late king's bloodline, and bolstered by Lorelei's hypnotic conspiracies, Loki staked his claim to the Jotun throne. Soon after, his well-meaning brother Thor stormed in, proclaiming that he'd restored order among the frost giants. Unseen by Thor, however, it was Loki who had quietly seized real power. Yet Loki had no intention of leading a frost giant assault on the gods. Odin still ruled Asgard, and a direct war against the divine realm would serve no one's interests, not even his own. In his prison cell, Loki at last saw through Odin's scheme. The Allfather meant to install him as king of the frost giants, and Asgardian puppet on Jotunheim's throne. Very well. Loki would claim that crown himself, force Odin to admit his mistake, and prove beyond doubt who truly deserved power. When Loki learned that Kull had shattered his magical seal, he wasted no time. Summoning the frost giants to his side, he stepped through the rift he'd discovered long ago and emerged on Midgard. He would pose as the realm's savior, outshine his brother Thor, and bend every mortal knelt before him, finally securing the worship that had always eluded him. High above the battlefield, Lucian drifted unseen. He watched Loki spread his arms in triumphant boastfulness and couldn't help a wry smile. "Talk about second-year arrogance," he murmured. Below, Kull studied the charging giants with cold amusement. "Jotunheim's warriors, marching under a god's banner? And you think you can face me without Laufey here to lead you?" In a single fluid motion, Kull's ornate scepter lengthened, its shaft twisting into the form of a tremendous battle-axe inscribed with frost-etched runes. He hefted the weapon, ready to meet the onslaught head-on. Lucian hefted his axe in one hand and channeled divine power through its blade. With a single, sweeping strike, he cleaved a dozen-meter-tall frost giant clean in half, as if it were nothing more than a stalk of leek. Swing after swing, he carved through the advancing horde. After just 12 arcs of his axe, the flood of giants emerging from the magical fissures had thinned by a full third. Even so, Lucian couldn't shake a flicker of unease whenever Laufey wielded the eternal winter coffin nearby. To Lucian, these ordinary frost giants scarcely ranked above ants, but Laufey's artifact could freeze foes in their tracks, and that power still gave him pause. Chapter 310, Lucian, the True Savior, Update 1. "How is this possible?" Loki hissed, watching frost giants topple in droves. He hadn't reckoned that Kull, banished and sealed in Midgard by Odin for untold years, would still possess such raw power. Left unmatched, not even the entire host of frost giant warriors could stand against him. Thor bellowed and unleashed a crackling blast of lightning that drove back the two Skyhammer masters. Loki, send your frost giants to finish off those corrupted mortals and the Skyhammer masters first. Once they're down, we'll face Kull together. Loki ground his teeth. I'd already planned that, thanks for the reminder. He reluctantly swept his arm through the air and called his frost giants off Kull, ordering them to reinforce the God Realm's army. Then, with the Banshee Enchantress, Lorelei, at his side, he surged toward Thor's position. Leave this to us. You go deal with Kull, Lucian ordered, voice cold as ice. He'd originally planned to have the frost giant soldiers wear Kull down while he and Lorelei slipped in for the kill, severing his head in one clean stroke. But Kull's strength proved overwhelming. Now Lucian revised his strategy. Send Thor in first. He didn't believe the Thunder God could defeat Kull outright, but Thor's legendary durability might absorb enough punishment, or even wound him, creating an opening for Lucian's true strike. And if that failed, they'd retreat to Jotunheim. Lucian wasn't about to throw away his forces on a fool's errand like Thor, who insisted on standing and fighting for a few mortals. For the glory of the divine realms. Across the battlefield, Loki and Lorelei wove their magic in perfect sync. Loki's shimmering illusions ensnared the two Skyhammer lords, while Lorelei's hypnotic song pinned them immobile. With Kull's reinforcements stalled, Thor let out a thunderous roar, swung Mjolnir in a blinding arc, and charged. Just you, eh? Kull, ever feeding on the fear around him, had grown stronger by the moment. Rather than meet Thor's hammer with his own great axe, he calmly extended a massive hand, and, to the astonishment of all, caught Mjolnir by the haft as if it were a child's plaything. Kull's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. With a single crushing motion of his hand, he smashed Thor's hammer to pieces. Thor stared in disbelief, his mouth agape. How? How is that possible? Kull gave him a contemptuous shove, sending the god of thunder sprawling across the battlefield. He planted a boot on Thor's chest and leaned in close. You're too weak. You couldn't even channel your sister's power. Tell me, why didn't Odin send Hela to finish this for him? You're beaten, Loki called from the side, his face pale. He motioned urgently to the frost giants. Fall back to Jotunheim. Realizing this fight was hopeless, the frost giants obeyed instantly, melting away into the snow and ice beyond the field. Only Kull remained, looming over Thor like a dark statue. Before anyone could react, a massive magic circle blazed into existence high overhead. Brilliant runes spun in the air, radiating an intense white light that poured down over every combatant. The monstrous Hydra soldiers, already swarming the field, roared in pain, their twisted forms collapsing as if struck by divine fire. Even the 8 Skyhammer elders, renowned for their endurance, staggered back and spat blood, their bodies convulsing from the overwhelming energy. Kull's sneer faltered for the first time. Loki, too, froze in place, staring up as the glow intensified. Somewhere amid the chaos, a clear, commanding voice rang out. By the law of the supreme magical fairies, be purified. And the battlefield fell into a stunned, reverent silence as the light continued to wash away the darkness. Kull had broken free of Thor's grasp, his entire body crackling with divine energy as he fixed a challenge on the heavens. Who dares to face me? He bellowed. A voice replied from above. You may call me Lucian. A column of pure white light descended, and before Kull stood an angelic figure with outstretched wings. With Lucian's arrival, Wolverine, Captain America, and the other heroic instructors, previously bound in the shadows, were suddenly freed. Lucian's gaze sharpened as he watched Kull crush Mjolnir against the ground with brute force. He knew he could wait no longer. Kull's power was growing by the second, and soon no one could stand against him. Raising his arms skyward, Lucian unleashed a colossal wave of arcane energy that rippled across the battlefield. Thanks to the goblin law he had activated, its devastating effect struck only those he designated as enemies. Thor and his allies stood safely beyond its wrath. The brilliance of the spell lit the arena, giving fresh hope to the desperate fighters below and thrilling millions of viewers watching live. In a heartbeat, Kull's rank-and-file minions, the small fry of his goblin horde, were blasted away, and the 8 Skyhammer masters, once renowned for their strength, fell wounded and reeling. As reinforcements surged to Lucian's side, The momentum of the battle shifted irreversibly. By sapping the people's fear, they could strip Kul of his power. He fed on terror, and as dread waned, so would his strength. Already, he pulsed with an otherworldly white light that made him look more like a deity than even Thor or Loki. He despised grandstanding, but these stakes left him no choice. "Lucian!" The cry rang out across the battlefield, and the tide of despair that had gripped the heroes instantly receded. Lucian strode forward, flanked by Captain America and the others. At last, their true champion had arrived. Even Thor, battered and unsteady, felt his courage return. Loki, still smarting from the last time Lucian had bested him, slid behind Lorelei. "Restore it as before," he snarled. With a sweeping gesture and a whispered incantation, Loki reversed time around Thor's fractured hammer. In an instant, the splintered pieces snapped back into place, and the weapon gleamed whole once more. Loki turned to Thor, a cold grin on his face. "You take on those 8 Skyhammer Masters. I'll handle our newcomer." Thor hefted Mjolnir, now fully repaired. "Lucian, watch out. His power is unlike anything we've faced." Lucian merely nodded, eyes locked on the radiant form of Kul. As Thor and the others charged to engage the 8 Masters, Lucian stepped forward to confront the godlike enemy alone. Kul's eyes grew serious as he regarded Lucian. "A secret mage from Midgard," he repeated quietly. "Tell your supreme mage Agamotto that I have no real desire to annihilate mortals. My goal is simply to absorb enough power here to return to the divine realm. This is the domain's affair, part of the war of the gods. You have no business meddling." Midgard's arcane mages, keepers of the Time Stone, were notoriously stubborn, especially their leader, Agamotto. Kul still remembered how, in his father Bor's day, even the mighty god quaked at Agamotto's name. That reputation had led Kul to confine his chaos to Washington, draining fear without laying waste to every city in Midgard. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he refused to show uncertainty. "Agamotto is no longer supreme mage," he said firmly. "He holds the title of Great Elder now. The current supreme mage of Kamat-Taj is Master Gu Yi, my own teacher. Your actions have already cost countless innocent lives. In Master Gu Yi's name, and on behalf of Kamat-Taj, I hereby place you under arrest. Both the Great Elder and the Supreme Mage are watching this scene very closely. Do not make this any harder than it needs to be." Lucian paused, recalling the Ancient One's warning. Kul's only true weakness is fear. As long as no one trembles before him, his power remains intact, but the moment fear takes root in his own heart, that power will collapse completely. Every word Lucian now spoke under the guise of Master Kamat-Taj was nothing more than a carefully crafted bluff, meant to strike terror into Kul's soul. Chapter 311, The Dragon and the Serpent, Second Update. Kul had been sealed by Odin for millennia, completely unaware that the Eye of Agamotto had long since departed Kamat-Taj. When he first unleashed the Eye's power, a tremor of fear ran through him. In response, he conjured the form of the Ancient One herself. Kul didn't know her, or just how formidable she was, until their clash began. It didn't take long for him to realize that the Ancient One far outmatched her own apprentice. And with the Eye of Agamotto levitating above them, even a victory over her projection would still leave him facing both the current Sorcerer Supreme and her legendary predecessor. Once such thoughts crept into his mind, Kul's confidence wavered and his magic faltered. After all, though he was never formally a member of Kamat-Taj, he had studied time magic under the Ancient One, making him, in a sense, her disciple. But now, standing against 2 of the greatest sorcerers the world had ever known, that title felt woefully insufficient. "If you think you can catch me, that all comes down to whether you've got the strength." Kul glowered, leapt forward, and swung his axe in a devastating overhead arc, as if he intended to split the earth itself on Lucian's head. Instead of dodging, Lucian summoned his giant's magic, his body growing to colossal proportions. In that instant, he seized the descending axe with both massive hands, the very weapon that could have ended a lesser warrior. Under normal circumstances, Lucian would have fought more cautiously, dodging blows, probing with long-range spells, and seeking the right magical advantage before committing. But this battle was being broadcast live to audiences around the world. If he let himself appear timid, he'd not only give Kul hope, he'd disappoint everyone watching. He needed to dominate, to strike fear into his opponent, and to let the world see who truly held the upper hand. Lucian let out a bestial roar as emerald and crimson energy crackled around him. Wood Flame Dragon Mode. Wood Flame Dragon's Roar, he bellowed, seizing the divine axe in both hands and pinning Kull in place. Then, with a sudden heave, molten flame burst from his mouth, a furious conflagration born of wood and fire, each element feeding the other to magnify his power tenfold. The scorching inferno struck Kull squarely, burning through armor plating and driving him to drop the axe. Gritting his teeth, Kull slammed up a divine shield to hold back the onslaught, but the heat seared him nonetheless. Snatching the moment, Lucian cried, "Dragon Slayer Secret Art, Infinite Collapse Fist of Thunderflame Wood." He hurled the divine axe into his personal pocket dimension and let draconic power surge through his veins. Jagged scales sprouted across his skin, and crackling lightning intertwined with roiling flame in his fists. Already massive by nature of his Dragon Slayer heritage, Lucian now towered over Kull, every muscle swollen with newfound might. From this height, he unleashed wave after wave of pure energy, an unending barrage of Ola strikes, hammering down on his stunned opponent. Caught off guard by Lucian's fiery breath and sheer ferocity, Kull was driven onto the back foot, unable even to mount a counterattack before the relentless assault overwhelmed him. Kull found himself forced to pour out divine energy just to parry Lucian's relentless onslaught. He'd never have dared to face such power if he'd only just been unsealed, but Lucian was backed by the Ancient One and the Eye of Agamotto, masters even his father, Bor, had learned to fear. Worry spread through Kull like a poison, sapping his strength with every strike. Even the mortals watching on their screens seemed to grow less afraid of him. Lucian's aura flared brighter with every attack, and Kull could feel his own power draining away. He gasped, "I can't keep this up." Determination hardened in Kull's eyes. If he couldn't turn the tide now, he'd never stand a chance. And he couldn't count on the Ancient One or Agamotto to intervene. With a thunderous roar, he unleashed his full might. His form swelled monstrously, his limbs stretching and twisting, and in an instant Lucian was hurled back. When the dust cleared, Kull had become a colossal serpent, the length of him spanning 3 or 4 kilometers, ready to crush any who dared oppose him. He was known as the Great Serpent, for when he fought, he truly became a living nightmare, the dread worm Jormungandr incarnate. "It's enormous," someone gasped. All of them recoiled in terror at Kull's transformation. Lucian's earlier shift into a 100-meter titan had seemed impressive, until this 3-kilometer-long serpent towered over them. For comparison, Shanghai's Oriental Pearl Tower reaches just over 460 meters. Kull's snake was the height of 6 or 7 such towers stacked one atop another. It was a walking mountain, an impossible colossus. How can any of us possibly stand against that? Dread rippled through the ranks. A low, mocking hiss drifted across the field. "Think you're the only one who can change." Lucian dispelled his giant spell and instantly shrank back to human size. Under his breath, he murmured the familiar incantation, Animagus. In the blink of an eye, his arms and legs lengthened into powerful wings and talons, his flesh hardened into emerald scales, his torso and tail stretched until he stood as a 500-meter dragon. Though dwarfed by Kull's 3-kilometer titan, Lucian's new form radiated raw, fiery power. As arcane sigils flared across his hide, he wove yet another enchantment, preparing himself to meet the great serpent on equal footing. Lucian had mastered giant magic, the spell that enlarges its target, and discovered it wasn't limited to human forms. In the fairy tale world, he'd already used it on his feline body. Now he applied it to his draconic form. With the enchantment in full effect, Lucian swelled from a 500-meter dragon into a titanic 5,000-meter behemoth. Across the battlefield, the 4,000-meter serpent Kull recoiled at the sight. The onlookers, accustomed to giant snakes but never dragons of such scale, felt their spirits lift. If a creature so vast as this dragon had chosen to stand against Kull, surely there was hope. "Impossible! You're no ordinary human," Kull bellowed, its hiss echoing like rolling thunder. In the next instant, the serpent lashed out, whipping its massive coils and sinking venomous fangs toward Lucian's flank. But Lucian held back from a direct, close-quarters fight. His gargantuan size was a clear advantage, yet sheer bulk wouldn't guarantee victory. Cole's transformed form was more than a simple snake. Each strike carried lethal venom, and its strength and agility at that scale were not to be underestimated. Lucian needed a smarter strategy than brute force if he was to topple this formidable opponent. Lucian's roar echoed through the ruined city as he shifted into his draconic form. In this state, his life force swelled to unimaginable levels, so potent that he could cast fairy law spells in rapid succession, drawing fresh vitality from the forest itself. With a single thought, he siphoned energy from the nearby trees and plants, their leaves wilting as raw magic flooded into him. His plan was clear: unleash a broad wave of magic first, then close in for the kill. Above the shattered rooftops, a gigantic magic circle flared to life. This time it was the goblins' turn. Their own goblin law spell materialized in pulsating green light, honing in on Lucian's ally, Ukul. Ukul staggered under the impact, but refused to fall. He tightened his grip on his spear and braced himself, ready to retaliate. Before he could strike back, though, the sky tore open once more. Brilliant runes spiraled above the battlefield, and Lucian's voice, now deep and resonant, chanted the words no one dared argue with: super magic, fairy law. A column of pure, silvery light burst from the circle, smashing into the goblin ranks. Lucian didn't pause for breath. Time and again he intoned the incantation, each super magic fairy law weaving a new circle in midair. 10 times, 12 times, it scarcely mattered. Arid, every blast hammered at Cole, the goblin chieftain, and his horde, scattering them like ragdolls. From his vantage in the sky, Lucian watched the green tide of goblins falter, their wicked formations splintering under his unrelenting assault. By the time the final runes faded, the battlefield lay in ruin, and Lucian, the magic dragon, hovered triumphant, his wings beating away the acrid smoke. Chapter 312, Sealing Cool, Third Update. Lucian had unleashed his most powerful spells 15 times in rapid succession, and even in his dragon form, he was nearing his limit. Each burst of magic had drawn heavily on his life force, and his natural recovery simply couldn't keep pace. He desperately needed to replenish his vitality, and fast. Fortunately, during his interstellar rescue missions, Lucian had stockpiled resources. In one primitive forest, he'd torn dozens of 100-foot trees from the earth and stashed them in a pocket dimension. Now, with a gesture and a whisper of arcane words, he summoned a small, enchanted box from that pocket. It floated above his dragon head, the lid popping open at his command. One by one, those massive trunks, each wide enough to choke a dozen people, tumbled out and slid straight into his gaping maw. Invoking his wood dragon's life absorption ability, Lucian sank his dragon's teeth into the wood. He devoured the trees with startling speed, chewing through bark and core alike as if they were nothing more than spicy strips. Within moments, every ounce of his spent vitality surged back. Just as he readied another devastating spell to bring the battle to its climax, Lucian noticed something unsettling. The immense serpent he had been fighting, Kull, was nowhere to be seen. A thunderous roar split the air behind him. Lucian whirled around, heart hammering. In that instant, he realized Kull had crept in during his momentary respite. The colossal snake reared up over him, colossal jaws opening in a single, terrifying motion aimed at swallowing him whole. "I'm going to eat you," Kull bellowed, its voice a rumble that shook the ground. Lucian's claws scrabbled for purchase on the earth as he prepared for the final, desperate struggle against the beast that threatened to end him. Lucian knew that even ordinary pythons could swallow prey 10 times their own size, but this was no ordinary snake. Kull's transformation had turned him into a nightmare of scales and muscle, a colossus whose gaping maw was broader than Lucian's entire dragon torso, and whose suction force could pull in anything that strayed too close. Instinctively, Lucian beat his great wings, trying to escape the vortex of air rushing into that cavernous mouth. But the suction was unlike anything he'd ever felt. It didn't merely draw him in, it froze the space around him, pinning him in mid-air. He tried to vanish with phantom displacement, only to discover that the spell itself shuddered and collapsed under the gravity of Kull's swallowing power. Beneath the danger, however, he reminded himself, he wasn't at full strength. "If I let it get the better of me now, I deserve to be eaten," he thought, flaring a defiant glow in his dragon eyes. He steadied his wings against the pull and swung around to face the gaping maw. Lightning crackled across his scaled snout as he prepared his most devastating attack. Fierce fire, arcane fire, draconic blaze, wood's green spark, thunder's fierce strike, combine and concentrate. Lucian roared. The air around him shimmered in black, red, and electric blue. He felt the power surge through his lungs and throat, condensing into a single, titanic sphere of flame. Since you're so eager to swallow, let me sear you from the inside out. Super electromagnetic mega flame ball. With a final roar, he unleashed the inferno. The fireball, several thousand meters in diameter, hurtled straight into Cole's yawning mouth, trailing crackling lightning. For a moment, everything went silent, save for the thunderous rumble that told Lucian his gambit had found its mark. Lucian channeled every last drop of his magic into his most devastating attack, a colossal fireball crackling with fused elemental flames. He judged that, while it wouldn't obliterate an entire planet, it could easily submerge a continent, and its raw power even eclipsed that of the fairy law. In his prime, he wasn't certain this alone would fell Cole. But now, weakened by their previous clash and rattled by more than a dozen fairy laws, Cole was badly injured. Under close scrutiny, most of his serpent scales had already crumbled away. "Now!" Lucian whispered to himself. Cole sensed the immense, crackling energy slamming toward him. He reared back, snapping his jaws shut in a desperate bid to dodge, but it was too late. Accelerated by a force akin to a super electromagnetic cannon, the fireball, nearly a mile across and laced with the curses of fierce fire, void flame, and draconic inferno, plowed straight into his gaping maw and thundered down his throat. Then, with a cataclysmic roar, it exploded in his gut. Boom! The explosion ripped through the great snake's belly, igniting a hellish blaze that engulfed Cole from the inside out. He screamed, a sound so thunderous it shook the cavern, as his scales blackened and hissed in the searing heat. Even drawing on his divine reserves, he could not fully snuff the flames assailing his body. But Lucian would not relent. In his colossal draconic form, he lunged forward, locking his mighty claws around Cole's vital spot, the infamous 7 inches. With a savage twist, he tore open the serpent's flank, then unleashed a torrent of blistering flame into the fresh wound. Lucian's magical reservoir was vast, though not infinite, and his draconic blood could not heal itself in an instant. Still, he poured every ember and spark he had into that gash, determined to slow-roast the beast until it was utterly vanquished. Cole writhed in agony, thrashing his massive head in a desperate bid to break free, but his strength was spent. Lucian's wing crashed down like an iron trap, slamming the serpent back onto the scorched earth. Smoke curled from the blackened wound, and Cole's roar faded into a pitiful gurgle. Around them, the allied Skyhammer masters, Saul and the others, stood frozen. They had thrown everything they had at the 8 great Skyhammer champions, halved their forces, and now looked on in horror as Lucian dealt the final, merciless strike. None dared move forward. None even dared think of intervening. The draconic lord had spoken judgment, and the verdict was absolute. Honestly, none of them still feared Cull. In fact, a few even felt a twinge of sympathy as they watched his charred, broken body. Stripped of the power to instill fear, he had lost every shred of leverage. With no hope of turning the tide, continuing the fight would only deepen his humiliation. Slowly, Cull's colossal serpent form shrank away, leaving him collapsed in a frail human shape. At the same moment, Lucian abandoned his draconic guise and returned to human form as well. Cole lay sprawled on the scorched earth, glaring up at Lucian through bloodshot eyes. "You can't kill me," he rasped. "As long as the divine realm endures, I cannot die. Not even Odin could truly destroy me." Lucian took a measured step forward. "Maybe not now," he replied quietly, "but don't think that will always be the case." He reached into his wardrobe space, a pocket dimension he called his closet of holding, and withdrew a small Matryoshka doll, its wooden surface etched with ancient sealing runes. "Seal!" At his command, Lucian intoned the words of Merlin's nesting doll sealing technique. A cascade of pale light sprang from the doll, engulfing the helpless god. In an instant, Cole was bound within the layers of the Matryoshka, his power locked away. Thus was the threat contained. Cole, whose might once rivaled Odin and Hela, now rested silent and powerless inside a little wooden figurine. Everyone had now uncovered the origin of the god's realm and bound themselves to it. Without destroying the realm itself, none of its denizens can be truly slain. Even Odin, the mightiest among us, lacks the power to raise that dimension, so he resorts to sealing threats like Kull and Hela on Earth. His strength still falls short of the three of them. His only advantage over Kor is distance. Cut off from the realm's life force, Kor cannot access his full power while he remains here. That's why Odin can only subdue him on Earth, never eliminate him outright. Someday, as Odin grows stronger and gains new methods, he will surely discover a way to finish Kor forever. Lucian held out the nesting doll as Thor and the others approached. "He's sealed inside this," Lucian explained. "Shall I take him back to the god's realm?" Thor scratched his head. "Father warned us against that. If we return him there, he'll drain the realm's power and recover almost instantly. We'd be far safer finding a way to lock him in place here on Earth." "In that case," Lucian said, "let me keep watch over the seal. If someone with ill intentions found it and freed him, it would spell disaster." Lucian's eyes narrowed as he placed the nesting doll, Kor's prison, into his dimensional wardrobe. Kor is a being on par with Odin. He feeds on fear, can expand into a colossal snake, and possesses a soul of extraordinary resilience. If he regains enough power, he could very well refine himself into a top-tier magical artifact. Saul bowed deeply, his expression grave. "Thank you, Lucian. Without your aid, I never could have defeated and sealed Kor. The Divine Realm owes you a tremendous debt. When I return, I will report your deeds directly to the Father God." Saul paused, then met Lucian's gaze with solemn certainty. Apart from Lucian, there was no one he would trust to guard Kor's prison. With Lucian's terrifying strength, even if Kor somehow managed to escape, he would be subdued again without question. There was simply no safer guardian. Chapter 313, Subfather Lucian, Update 1. Enough, Loki. Having just confirmed Kull's recovery with Lucian, Thor whirled around, only to find his ever-cunning brother already slipping away through the frost giant's shimmering rift. "Farewell, you insufferable dolt," Loki called back, waving as the portal snapped shut behind him. He had no intention of returning to the realm of the gods and landing in Thor's prison. Lucian couldn't suppress a wry smile as he patted Saul on the shoulder. He'd sensed Loki's escape the moment the rift flickered, but recalling the Ancient One's warning, he chose not to stop him. In one corner of the multiverse, Loki had ascended to become the god of stories, a power that spanned realities. Better not to push him too far. "He means well, just lost his way," Lucian said softly. "Once we're back in the realm of the gods, I'll speak with Father about this. Then I'll journey to Jotunheim and see if I can bring him back around." Thor sheathed Mjolnir with a nod. "First, then, let's return home." Lucian stood at the edge of the shattered Rainbow Bridge as its final arches collapsed behind him. Thor had already departed with the army of God's domain. Moments later, Captain America, Iron Man, and the others arrived, escorting the 8 prisoners known as the Heavenly Hammers. The air was thick with tension. Among the captives were Hydra's leader, that blue-skinned oddity, and the 7 killer-enhanced operatives, each tightly bound and under Tony's watchful eye. Only T'Chaka, the elder statesman of Wakanda, remained on Black Panther's soil under the protection of T'Challa's royal guards. Tony Stark and his team had deliberately kept their distance. T'Challa stepped forward, respectfully doffing his ceremonial suit. Gently, he lifted his father's still form and placed him in the care of Wakandan honor guards. Then, with every ounce of Wakandan courtesy, he addressed Lucian. "Mr. Lucian, I beg your forgiveness. My father was ensorcelled. He, too, is one of this war's victims." Lucian met T'Challa's earnest gaze and inclined his head. He understood how vulnerable even the most powerful mind could become under dark enchantments. "Understood," Lucian replied quietly, "but we must decide what to do next." T'Challa's relief was palpable. He had intended to return immediately to Wakanda, ceremony and all. Yet Captain America shook his head, and Iron Man's expression was grim. "Hold on," Tony interjected. "T'Chaka, Lord Skyhammer, slaughtered countless innocents during this conflict. We can't just let him go home." T'Challa's jaw tightened. He was not himself. Tony folded his arms. "We get that, but in our book, killing that many people demands accountability. We either bring him in for debriefing, or we're prepared to take him by force." A tense silence fell. Lucian weighed the options. A battle between Wakanda's finest and the Avengers was the last thing anyone needed, But justice for those lost could not be denied. Finally, Lucian spoke, his voice calm but resolute. There has to be a solution that spares both honor and justice. Let us find it, together. And in that fragile moment, with shields lowered just slightly and lions and eagles eyeing each other across the broken bridge, the uneasy seeds of an alliance took root once more. As the most technologically advanced nation on Earth, Wakanda had never feared another country, until now. After witnessing the raw power Lucian had displayed against Kul, even T'Challa's scientists and generals dared not underestimate him. They knew all too well that, if Lucian willed it, he could raise Wakanda single-handedly. Bewitched or not, we have to find out what we're dealing with, Steve said, stepping forward. He met Lucian's gaze and added, "There's no need to engage him yet. Let's hold off, for now." Lucian offered no protest. Without a sound, he drifted up into the sky, his cloak billowing around him, and raised his staff. He murmured a sequence of restoration spells over the ruins of Sokovia, an area now cut off like an island in the Potomac knee, or Washington, D.C. Brick and steel knitted themselves back together, shattered glass remelted into window panes, support beams realigned as though the buildings had never fallen. The scene was broadcast live worldwide, and millions watched in stunned silence before one unanimous thought rippled through every viewer's mind. This is a miracle. For Lucian, mending those ruins was effortless magic, but more than spectacle, it offered hope. Countless lives remained buried in the wreckage, and while he couldn't personally tend to each survivor, his spells had stabilized the area long enough for rescue crews to evacuate the injured. In that moment, the world saw that Lucian's power could destroy, or restore, on a scale unmatched by any nation. Lucian watched the scene below with cool detachment. He could have swooped in and cured every disease on Earth, no sweat, but that wasn't his mission. He didn't heal for the sake of healing. That was a doctor's job, not his. As he landed, another S-Shield Quinjet touched down beside him. Director Coulson emerged, flanked by agents fresh from the New York base. Reporters were already converging, cameras flashing. "I'll take it from here," Coulson said with a curt nod. "As for your reward, I haven't decided yet. I'll let you know." Lucian scarcely acknowledged him. He reached into a pocket dimension and produced a compact black case. One by one, he stowed Wakanda's sleek spaceship and the 8 mystic hammers inside it. With everything secured, he vanished in a ripple of violet light. Moments later, he reappeared in the courtyard of Xavier Academy. The students and faculty he'd brought along materialized around him, unharmed and bewildered, but safe. Lucian allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. By defeating and sealing away Kul, he'd not only rescued countless lives, but also ensured that God's domain now owed him a substantial favor. And more importantly, he'd confirmed exactly how formidable he was at the peak of his power. Mission accomplished. Lucian had studied the power hierarchy of the Marvel Universe so thoroughly in his previous life that he could place himself with confidence, just barely, at the threshold of the Heavenly Father tier. In broad strokes, the Marvel cosmos recognizes 6 major power levels, though the exact definitions can blur from one reality to the next and even shift with the wielder's circumstances. At the base is the Earth level. Here dwell most Avengers and street-level heroes. Their destructive potential is formidable, but still confined to the planet. One step above sits the Heavenly Father tier. Figures like Hela, Kul, Thanos, the Ancient One, and Odin all occupy this rank. Yet Ancient One and Odin are wild cards. Their strengths aren't fixed. The Ancient One can draw upon the sanctuaries of Earth, Bar Enigma, Kamartaj, the Dark Dimension Nexus, to surge to the very edge of Heavenly Father might. Likewise, Odin's domain in Asgard grants him bursts of power that momentarily brush up against the realm of a single universe. Surpassing the Heavenly Father level is the single universe tier. Celestials in their native dimensions and countless extra-dimensional entities hover at this scale, wielding power to reshape or unmake entire worlds. And beyond that lies the multiverse level, beings so vast that they could annihilate a universe in moments, entities who exist not just across worlds, but across all possible realities. Lucian knew he wasn't yet a celestial, nor could he claim multiversal sway. But standing on the cusp of the Heavenly Father threshold, that, he reminded himself, was already an achievement few mortals could dream of. Lucian reviewed the cosmic hierarchy he'd pieced together from the scattered memories of his past life. At one of the lower rungs sat Sithon, the god of black magic and the very source of Scarlet Witch's uncanny power. Above him loomed the 5 primordial gods. One tier higher was the super-universe level, home to the life court that administered every universe. Beyond that reigned the one above all, the omnipotent architect of the entire Marvel multiverse. Of course, this outline was little more than an educated guess. Lucian had yet to venture anywhere near those supreme realms. By comparison, his own status was modest. He classified himself at the sub-father level, powerful enough to defeat Kull, the exile trapped on Earth, yet still powerless to challenge Odin in the realm of the gods. But that hardly mattered. His recent demonstration of raw power had broadcast a clear warning to every government official and clandestine organization on the planet. Interfere with Lucian's affairs at your own risk, and your nation could vanish from the map in an instant. With such a threat hanging over them, endless pointless conflicts would evaporate before they even began. Thirdly, after this incident, no superpower on Earth will ever question the Academy's ability to protect them. They'll place their full trust in us, and more heroes, both faculty and students, will flock to our doors. Lucian's strength is already extraordinary, but the world is full of hidden depths and surprising allies. Take Reyna of the Inhumans, for instance. She can glimpse brief fragments of the future, a gift that may prove indispensable. Chapter 314, Desperate Virus, Second Update. Lucian closed his eyes and sifted through the stolen memories of the 8 captured Hydra venerables. Images of dark rituals and arcane symbols flickered before him, undeniable proof that Kull's divine power had stripped them of free will. "All right," he said at last, opening his eyes. They were indeed bewitched by Kull. They had no choice in their actions. He flicked a glance at T'Challa and the Wakandan guards arrayed behind him. "Still," Lucian continued, "even unenchanted, these Hydra leaders have slaughtered countless innocents. Mercy would only invite more suffering." He raised both hands. Brilliant blue flames, cold to the touch but lethal nonetheless, sprang to life around his palms. In a heartbeat, Original Sin, Baron Zemo, Baron Struck, Madame Hydra, and Hive were engulfed by that unearthly fire. Their screams barely registered before they were reduced to drifting ash. A hush fell over the courtyard as the last ember faded. Even T'Challa found himself at a loss for words. "Mr. Lucian," the young Wakandan prince managed at length. "What of my father?" Lucian turned, the glow of his flames dying in his eyes. "Kull's spell has been sealed," he explained calmly. "Your father remains unconscious in a deep coma, but he will recover once the sedative runs its course." He offered a small, almost wry smile. "By the way, I've been reading about Wakanda's vibranium mountains and how your nation provided the ore for Captain America's shield. It seems our paths were meant to cross." T'Challa's expression shifted from worry to guarded curiosity. Before he could respond, Lucian added, "Speaking of vibranium, I'll be needing a shipment soon. Consider it a mutually beneficial arrangement." He turned on his heel and walked away. He half the swish of his cloak, the only sound left in the silent courtyard. The ash of Hydra's greatest villains scattered on the wind, an unmistakable testament to a warning no one would soon forget. Lucian stepped through the haze of dust and smoke, surveying the ruins of Hydra's last stronghold. 5 of their operatives lay reduced to ash at his feet, a silent testament to his power. He brushed a wisp of gray from his sleeve and turned to the young prince standing nearby. "Don't worry," Lucian said, voice calm and assured. "I'll pay whatever the market demands. I'm not looking for a handout." T'Challa lowered his head in respectful acknowledgement. Educated in New York and versed in the world beyond Wakanda's borders, he carried both the wisdom of the outside and the weight of his nation's secrets. "Your generosity honors us," he replied. "You rescued my father, King T'Chaka, and freed him from Hydra's clutches. Words cannot express our gratitude. Please, allow us to offer you vibranium as a token of thanks." A flicker of conflict crossed T'Challa's features. He knew better than anyone that Wakanda's vibranium was never sold, nor permitted to leave their hidden nation. Every facet of Wakandan life was sustained by it, and all trade with outsiders had long been forbidden. Yet here was Lucian, capable of turning 5 Hydra agents to dust with a thought. To refuse him might jeopardize not only the prince and the king, but the very secrecy of Wakanda itself. Lucian's lips curved into a half-smile. Since you insist, it would be discourteous to refuse. Very well, give me what you can spare. But first, you and your father must leave, now. T'Challa inclined his head again and led King T'Chaka toward the exit. As they passed through the ruined doorway, Lucian stood watch, the echoes of distant alarms fading behind them, and the promise of a delicate alliance glimmering in the aftermath of battle. Lucian watched impassively as T'Challa hesitated. When I need it, Lucian said coolly, I'll simply come to Wakanda and collect it. I already know exactly where it is. T'Challa forced a brittle laugh, suppressing the flicker of alarm in his eyes. All right, he said, bowing his head in reluctant agreement. He knew better than to refuse outright. If he crossed Lucian now, the stranger might very well make him regret it. Moments later, the Black Panther boarded his sleek starship, the old king and his royal guards still unconscious, and lifted off into the night sky. Lucian waited until the engine's hum faded, then turned his attention to the figure slumped against the wall. Killian, apparently comatose. Don't think you're getting away by playing dead, Lucian said, stepping closer. You've seen far too much. I'm deciding right now whether you deserve to live. Cool may have manipulated you, but you're hardly innocent. You performed those horrific experiments long before he ever set eyes on you. He held out a hand, fingers tracing an intricate pattern in the air. A soft violet glow wound around Killian's prone form. Within seconds, the man's chest began to rise and fall, his eyelids fluttering open. Killian coughed and sat up, blinking blearily at the soft light. Don't kill me, he gasped. My experiments. My only goal was to help the disabled regenerate lost limbs. It was supposed to benefit society. Every one of my subjects was a disabled veteran, and they volunteered willingly. Lucian's lips curled into a sardonic half-smile. He stepped back, folding his arms across his chest. Is that so? He murmured. Then perhaps you can explain why your volunteers paid such a terrible price. He let the question hang in the charged silence. Killian's fate, at least for now, still very much in doubt. Lucian's voice was calm but unwavering as he met Aldrez Killian's fiery glare. Your own memories contradict you. You weren't interested in limb regeneration for the disabled. That was Dr. Maya Hansen's work. Your aim was far darker, to breed an army of extremis-enhanced soldiers, first to get revenge on Tony Stark, then to seize the United States, and eventually the world. All so you could stand alone as its supreme ruler. Tony took a step forward, confusion etched across his face. Who are you anyway? And why would you hate me so much? I don't remember ever wronging you. Killian's skin shimmered with heat, small flames licking at his sleeves. Stark, he spat, voice crackling. You arrogant fool. Do you even know who I am? He surged forward, intent on closing the distance between them. But Lucian was faster. With a single gesture, a luminous barrier sprang to life around Killian, pinning him in place. Sparks danced along the energy field as Killian thrashed, furious at being restrained. His name was Aldrez Killian, Lucian announced, eyes never leaving the seething man within the barrier. Once he admired you, idolized you, in fact. He came to you seeking guidance, hoping to change the world for the better. But you were too busy building your empire to notice. When you turned him away, he turned his genius into a weapon. Tony's jaw clenched as he realized the truth in Lucian's words. Across the lab, Maya Hansen's data screens glowed softly, a silent testament to her own noble, but now hijacked research. Killian seethed, flames flickering in his eyes, but he could no longer deny the path he'd chosen. Lucian lowered his hand. The barrier dissipated, and Killian collapsed to one knee, spent. It's not too late, Lucian said quietly. You can still step away from this. Let Maya's original purpose guide you instead of this madness. For a long moment, the only sound was Killian's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, he lifted his head and met Lucian's gaze, not with hatred, but with a flicker of the man he once was. On the last night of 1999, New Year's Eve in Bern, Switzerland, Lucian arrived determined. He'd tracked Tony Stark here, where Stark Industries was throwing its Millennium Gala, in hopes of securing funding for the Extremis virus project at his fledgling company, Pioneer Technology. Lucian believed the virus could revolutionize medicine, but without Tony's investment, he had no means to continue. Instead, Tony was already preoccupied. He'd taken a shine to Dr. Maya Lewin, one of the evening's guests, and was intent on seducing her behind Lucian's back. Without a second, though, he told Lucian to wait for him on the rooftop, then vanished into the party. For what felt like hours, Lucian stood alone under a snow-spattered sky. The cold bit through his coat. Each passing minute stripped away his hope. When the final fireworks heralded the new millennium, and Tony still hadn't appeared, Lucian realized he'd been abandoned. Shame and fury welled inside him, and for a moment he teetered on the edge of the parapet, contemplating the unthinkable. But instead of jumping, Lucian harnessed his rage. He swore he would perfect his extremist research and, when the time was right, make Tony regret the insult. The very next morning, Lucian sought out Dr. Maya at the gala's quiet aftermath. Though she'd spent the night with Tony, she'd never followed through on funding his experiments. Lucian approached her diplomatically, proposing a joint venture. He'd refine extremists to help rehabilitate disabled veterans, and she'd leverage her contacts to secure the necessary capital. Seeing honesty in his determined expression, Maya hesitated, then offered the apology Lucian had never expected. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice wavering. "I was so caught up in everything last night, I didn't consider how my actions might have hurt you." Lucian's anger softened. "Thank you," he replied. "I made mistakes too. Let's focus on moving forward." Word of this partnership soon reached Tony. Faced with Lucian's unwavering resolve and Maya's renewed alliance, Tony couldn't ignore the memories he'd long tried to bury. The cold rooftop, the promise he'd broken, and Lucian's near-tragic despair. Confronted with genuine remorse, Tony sought out Lucian, and for the first time in over a decade, said the words he'd never properly voiced. "I'm sorry. I was wrong to leave you up there that night." In that instant, a bridge began to form between them, one built on accountability, forgiveness, and the shared desire to see Extremis achieve its promise. Killian clearly didn't appreciate Lucian's gesture, and Wolverine couldn't resist mocking him. "You've got an awful personality these days. No improvement." Another bystander chimed in. "If it's not a capital offense, lock him up first. Releasing him later will only be a headache." Lucian considered their words, and without another thought, sealed Killian in a containment box. He refused to turn him over to the authorities. If the government got their hands on Killian, and by extension, the Extremis virus, they'd undoubtedly create a legion of infected super soldiers. Better to keep him here, at least until Lucian decided how to handle the situation. Despite his caution, Lucian couldn't deny a spark of curiosity about the Extremis virus himself. It was said to boost raw physical strength, though Lucian's body was already exceptionally powerful. It granted immunity to extreme heat, even superheating the host to magma-like temperatures and unleashing flame bursts, which could amplify his fire magic. All of that was interesting, but what truly fascinated him was the virus's regenerative gift, a supercharged self-healing ability that bordered on the miraculous. Lucian knew that as long as the body remained fundamentally intact, even a lost arm or leg could snap back into place within seconds. In fact, his own strength had grown so immense, even granting him the power to shift into a dragon form, that he should be well within that regenerative threshold. Yet he also understood his limits. If a limb were cleanly severed, he alone lacked the magical spark required to regrow it. At best, he could reattach it through potent healing spells. He'd read of a potion in the Harry Potter world capable of restoring amputated limbs, but its recipe demanded exotic herbs found only in that realm, ingredients impossible to source elsewhere. Faced with this vulnerability, Lucian couldn't shake a single compelling thought. Perhaps he should embrace the Extremis virus. If the legends were true, it would elevate his resilience to unprecedented heights, and might finally grant him the kind of self-sufficiency he so desperately needed. Chapter 315, Advancement to Level 5 Superpower, Third Update. When the dust settled after the showdown with Killian, only a scrap of blue-scaled skin remained, obviously not human. Everyone in the room leaned forward, curious. Lucian carefully dropped the skin into a secure containment box, then turned to face the others. "This creature is called Haisha. He's from Atlantis." "Atlantis?" someone echoed, eyebrows shooting up. Lucian nodded. "Yes, they're an aquatic race living beneath the waves. For now, lock him up and we'll question him later." With that, he closed the box and activated its energy seals. Then, projecting Haisha's fragmented memories, he began to explain what he'd learned. In this universe, Atlantis isn't the mythical empire you've seen in the movies. It was founded in the 1500s by Mayan refugees, Mayan settlers who fled to what's now coastal China and North America to escape the colonial powers. Harsh persecution drove them to experiment with a native herb laced with vibranium. The result was a mutation that let them breathe underwater, resist crushing pressures, and swim at incredible speeds. Over centuries, they built a hidden nation beneath the seas. A hum of astonishment rippled through the room. Wakanda had been their first hidden society. Now, Atlantis. How many secret civilizations were still waiting to be discovered on Earth? Lucian tapped a control panel, dismissing the projection. That's all I have for now. We'll debrief once we've learned more. As the box's seals glowed blue, Lucian allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. Promotion to level 5 superpower had its perks, and plenty of new challenges ahead. Atlantis is one of Earth's oldest civilizations, rising from the depths in a forgotten age. Its current monarch, King Namor, is a remarkable hybrid, the son of an Atlantean princess and a mutant, born shortly before World War II. From his Atlantean blood, he can breathe underwater and withstand immense ocean pressure. From his mutant side, he has mastered the gift of flight. Yet, not everyone accepts his rule. Prince Haisha, a pureblood Atlantean, regards Namor as an illegitimate usurper and has instigated one failed uprising after another to seize the throne. Haisha claimed that if Namor truly cared about the fate of the imprisoned sea demon, he would have shown mercy, or if he saw no use for the creature, he could have executed it long ago. In Haisha's eyes, the demon is nothing but a threat, and any ruler who spares it is unworthy of Atlantis itself. With that conflict finally resolved, at least for the moment, Atlantis's champions dispersed to their own pursuits. Lucian, meanwhile, returned to his magical studies. He has nearly perfected alchemy and now dreams even bigger. He plans to weave enchantments from multiple realms so that his entire academy will rise into the sky and become a floating city. Next on his list is activating every enchanted artifact in his possession. Door-opening keys, the bewitched school bus, magical automobiles, one by one, until the world itself seems alive with sorcery. Beyond Atlantis, the aftershocks of recent events are already reaching far shores. In the highest corridors of U.S. power, leaders are scrambling to understand and respond to threats they once dismissed as legend, changes that could reshape nations and redraw alliances across the globe. Chapter 7. Divided Focus. Around the globe, governments and citizens speculated wildly about the origins of the god soldiers and the frost giants. Reports of fanatical worship of Lucian and other newly emerged superheroes dominated every news cycle, and the world order itself seemed to be shifting under the weight of these revelations. Yet Lucian remained unfazed. Now more powerful than ever, he simply didn't care what ordinary people thought. In a hidden facility on the outskirts of Academy City, Lucian continued his studies of Puritan magic through the salvaged memories of Shirley Cromwell, a project that had already yielded significant breakthroughs. His two highest priorities were clear. Master time magic and rescue the stranded members of Fairy Tale. But time magic was notoriously unforgiving. It resisted quick advances, and even Lucian couldn't bend it to his will overnight. Recognizing this, he issued a calibrated strategy for his many clones. Those dispatched to the Fairy Tale realm dedicate all their energy to time magic research, pushing relentlessly for every marginal gain. Back in the primary Marvel universe, the bulk of his forces also focus on temporal studies, ensuring his own timeline remains firmly under his control. Meanwhile, clones sent to alternate dimensions continue their deep-dive explorations of each world's indigenous magical systems, seeking new techniques and untapped sources of power. In this way, Lucian ensured that no avenue of advancement was neglected, even as he concentrated on the one discipline he needed most. Time would tell if his plan paid off, but he had no intention of letting it slip through his fingers. Lucian had spent the past weeks deep in Academy City's experimental archives, hunting for any scrap of data that might point toward time magic. After all, the city's overall magical research had leapt forward recently, and those breakthroughs offered promising clues for chronomancy. At the same time, His clone oversaw Kihara Juta's training, driving the young superhuman to ever greater feats under strict supervision, while Lucian himself turned his attention to the wealth of Puritan arcana he'd acquired from Shirley. Shirley was no ordinary spellcaster. A stalwart of the Church of Necessary Evil's Puritan branch, she'd been forged in the Church's most austere schools and could cite foundational theory as easily as she could perform puppet magic. But her true strength lay in her encyclopedic knowledge. She'd cataloged dozens of magical systems, believing that to defeat an enemy, one must first understand the principles behind its power. Lucian devoured her teachings with insatiable hunger, first mastering the subtle threads that animated her puppets, then moving on to the structured patterns of rune enchantment and the lofty formulas of high spellcraft. Among the new spells that left him breathless was a rune-etched sword, its crystal blade streaked with swirling red and blue. With a whispered incantation, it could summon an unending host of flame giants within the runic boundary, beings that pursued any target they detected until nothing remained but ash. Innovations like this convinced Lucian that true mastery lay at the intersection of artistry and arcane science, and that, with each new discovery, he was one step closer to unraveling the greatest mystery of all, the secrets of time itself. Lucian had mastered an impressive array of runic formations and jutsu styles, many of which mirrored, and in some cases improved upon, spells he'd encountered in other worlds. For instance, his repelling idler's rune formation works much like a Muggle shielding charm. It throws back anyone deemed a non-mage before they can even breach its perimeter. Then, there's his long-range red jutsu style, which fires magical projectiles as accurately and swiftly as a missile system, and the black jutsu style, capable of summoning towering walls of water to safeguard an entire city. Around him, 4 Lipa detection runes sweep a 3-kilometer radius, constantly scanning for hostile signatures. Lucian picked up these techniques with astonishing speed, not because they're identical across dimensions, but because their fundamental principles echo the magic he'd studied before. Every world's magic has its quirks, certainly, but the core laws are surprisingly consistent. With only minor adjustments in his approach, he's able to reverse engineer or adapt nearly any spell. He's even enhanced some of them. Take his signature flame sword, for example. A standard version conjures fire at 3,000 degrees Celsius, deadly enough on its own, but Lucian infuses it with 3 distinct fire essences: magic fire for raw power, fierce fire for burning intensity, and dragon fire for that extra draconic luster. The result is a blade whose special attacks leave nothing but ash in their wake. Lucian's forge glowed in the dim light, the air thick with the hiss of flame and the scent of brimstone. Every time he struck the blade, it didn't merely scorch with fire, it brimmed with curses and dark energy. Drawing on ambient magic, Lucian forged the sword's core, then injected his own mana to expand its blade and amplify its power. Sparks danced along the edge, as the weapon pulsed with lethal promise. Beside him stood a row of rune-etched flame giants, arcane constructs ready to obey any command. Before casting their bindings, Lucian had carefully covered each runic inscription with thin sheets of enchanted parchment. Should the sheets be peeled away or soaked in water, the delicate runes would blur or vanish. He'd learned to conceal their true design by weaving them into the world arrangement magic so that no enemy could detect or dismantle them. Once placed, the giants would stand guard, their runes hidden in plain sight. Glancing up at the clock, Lucian realized it was nearly time for his afternoon session. With a smooth gesture, he activated his stealth apparition and vanished from the workshop in a flicker of shadow. Moments later, he reappeared at the iron gates of the Hound Troop's laboratory. Kihara Suda, his supervisor, greeted him with a nod, and Lucian followed him past rows of humming devices and bright monitors. Inside the main chamber, Lucian lay down on the experimental table. Tubes and needles clicked into place as he injected the specially formulated serums designed to heighten his innate magic. High-frequency scanners traced every pulse of his mana, while nanite-infused machines calibrated the flow of power through his veins. This routine had become second nature, but today, something felt different. A subtle shift in the laboratory's hum hinted that, before long, Lucian's newly awakened abilities would be tested in ways he could never have predicted. Lucian had always sensed a slight uptick in his abilities after each experiment, but nothing ever felt dramatic, until now. Today, he felt as though some invisible barrier had shattered, unleashing a surge in his powers and sharpening the computational capacity of his mind. "He's finally broken through to level 5, Lucian murmured, excitement and pride mingling in his voice. "Time to report to the high sanctuaries, but first, let's see how much the chairman knows." He straightened from his workstation and stared at the holographic readout hovering before him. Level 5 confirmed. A confident smile crossed his lips as he prepared to probe deeper into the chairman's secrets. Chapter 316, The Chairman Hanging Upside Down. "The trace is here. Aleister Crowley." Emerging from the Hound Force base, Lucian faded into invisibility. As he glided toward the 7th Ward, he wove a delicate tracking spell keyed to the unique magical signature of Chairman Aleister Crowley. Based on everything he'd learned, Academy City could only amplify supernatural powers up to level 5. Lucian had already hit that ceiling, so the city's scientific enhancements were no longer enough. His only remaining path was through real magic. He still hadn't figured a way to break into Index's automatic script defense, nor could he seize the 100,000 grimoires she guarded. His best option was to infiltrate the great churches, slipping into their hidden libraries to claim ancient spellbooks. Failing that, he'd have to take down a senior cleric and extract memories directly from their mind. But before any of that, Lucian needed to discover exactly who Aleister Crowley was, the mysterious chairman who founded Academy City and set science and magic on a collision course. Lucian couldn't shake the feeling that the chairman was secretly pulling the strings behind every major incident. Part of him wanted to get closer, just enough to pry loose the chairman's hidden secrets. But he also suspected that, as Academy City's founder and supreme leader, the chairman might be orchestrating something far grander, a way to push level 5 espers all the way to level 6. Level 6, often called absolute power, was said to let even a mortal vessel perceive the will of the gods, wielding strength comparable to a demon's. In Lucian's memory, the demon god had once been merely a magician. Through forbidden rituals and perfect mastery of magic, this sorcerer had elevated himself to divine status, and with infinite power, he had destroyed entire worlds. By Lucian's reckoning, even Marvel, the cataclysmic force that annihilated a universe, was less potent than a true level 6. If he could achieve that next step, Lucian's power would explode in ways he could barely imagine. Until now, even at the height of his dragon transformation, he had only reached sub-Tianfu level. The prospect of surpassing that limit drove his ambition and curiosity in equal measure, and he knew he would do whatever it took to learn the chairman's secrets. Lucian hovered a few feet above the flat, windowless rooftop, narrowing his eyes at the strange, featureless structure before him. His tracking spell glowed faintly, confirming he'd found Aleister's precise location in the heart of School District 7. He didn't bother with the front door. He simply whispered, "Allaho hole," and watched as the heavy metal hatch slid open. He slipped inside, cloaked by an invisibility charm, and made his way down a flight of stairs into an immense hall. The room only heightened the building's uncanny atmosphere. The floors and walls were carved to resemble oversized circuit boards, their etched lines glowing with pale light. At the center stood a cylindrical life support apparatus, all transparent glass and humming machinery. Inside floated a gaunt figure, long silver hair cascading downward as his body hung upside down in the chamber's nutrient fluid. Around the cylinder, holographic displays flickered with arcane symbols and streams of data. Lucian's heart quickened. His tracking rune pointed directly at the captive man. This was Aleister Crowley, the enigmatic hanged man, architect of Academy City, and Lucian's quarry at last. Lucian drifted through the hushed corridors of the research wing, his eyes fixed on the chamber where Aleister lay bound. He couldn't shake a nagging thought. The man credited with founding Academy City, who had harnessed science and magic alike, should never have felt so ordinary. Lucian reached out with his senses, searching for even the faintest ripple of arcane energy. But the hanged man's body, suspended upside down in the divine suspension device, registered nothing. He shook his head. It made no sense. A perfect clone ought to match the original's prowess. Magic incul. You did. Could Alistair be possessed? Demonic? Lucian strained to detect any infernal taint, but there was none. So if you're not demon-ridden, then what are you? He murmured. At that instant, Alistair stirred. His eyes snapped open, twin lanterns of pale power, and he swept his gaze over the chamber, piercing Lucian's invisibility. Without warning, a wave of raw magic roared from the seals of the device, lashing out and pinning Lucian in midair. He froze, helpless under the onslaught. Only then did Lucian understand. This was no mere technocrat hiding behind scientific genius. Alistair was a sorcerer of unparalleled strength, his true might concealed so completely that even Lucian, trained to sense the subtlest magic, had been taken in. The founder of Academy City was far more formidable than anyone had ever imagined. Lucian felt the oppressive weight of Alistair's magic clamp down on him, sapping his strength and freezing his limbs. He even tried to summon his phantom for a quick escape, but the spell fizzled before it could form. Still, he wasn't completely out of options. As an animagus, he could shift into his dragon form, an immense being whose raw power would break Alistair's magical bonds and let him disapparate in an instant. Yet Lucian held back. Alistair hadn't struck him, he'd only stilled him. And the more Lucian realized just how formidable this magician was, the more intrigued he became. A sorcerer of such caliber could never be a mere footnote in history, yet to the outside world, Alistair's true nature remained a secret. Everyone knew him only as the visionary who founded Academy City, a metropolis of superhuman talents meant to rival the world of magic with pure technology. People assumed he was either a top-tier scientist or a level 5 esper. So who was Alistair, really? And what hidden purpose lay behind the creation of Academy City? Lucian shook his head, his expression tense but determined. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm not demon-possessed. Alistair eased the magical bind he'd used to hold him in place and studied Lucian with keen interest. Even if a demon had taken you over, you wouldn't be limited to a display of this faint power, he said, his voice thoughtful. So who are you, really? You don't belong to our world. Lucian forced himself to stay calm. He'd risked enough already by revealing even this fraction of his strength. Since that terrible year, he'd hidden inside a biocapsule, pulling strings from the shadows, manipulating key figures across Academy City to advance his secret agenda. He never took direct action, precisely to keep his identity safe. But after the incursion of clone number 9981, he'd had no choice but to respond. That clone's power rivaled that of a seasoned saint, yet the magic it wielded was unlike anything Lucian had ever encountered. It wasn't the modern arcane arts he and others had developed, or any known tradition in this realm, but something ancient and alien, as if drawn from a world beyond their own. Only by pushing himself past caution had Lucian managed to suppress the clone's assault. Now faced with Alistair's probing gaze, he realized that hiding in the shadows would no longer be enough. The true battle was only just beginning. How could Lucian be so sure clone known number 9981 didn't originate from this world? It came down to his understanding of the realm's magic. He knew that any supernatural power foreign to this world would conflict with its native spells, and clone number 9981's abilities were clearly incompatible. In other words, the clone couldn't tap into the world's magic, so its very essence had to lie elsewhere. Creatures like demons, devils, or angels sometimes showed similar traits, but when Lucian scanned the clone, he detected none of their signatures. The absence of any demonic, devilish, or angelic markers both puzzled him and stoked his curiosity. Who or what was clone 99981, if not a being of this world? Chapter 317, Dragon from Another World, Second Update. I don't belong to this world, the chairman said, his voice calm despite his predicament. But the situation is complicated. You probably won't understand even if I try to explain. Lucian studied the man hanging upside down before him. He crouched on the dusty ground, resting his chin on his hand. Then who are you? He asked. The magic you just released was incredibly powerful. You must be one of the great magicians, founder of this Academy City, and the very architect of the superpower system. That rings a bell. Lucian's mind flickered back to the files Shirley, the Puritan intelligence officer, had shared. He knew this world's magical history inside and out, and he knew its legends. One name stood out above all others, Beast Alexander. crowned the greatest magician of the 20th century, and whispered to be the mortal closest to the devil himself, he had shaped modern magic like no one else. Even now, 20% of the world's magicians were his direct disciples, and nearly half had felt his influence. Yet behind his genius lay tales of cruelty and moral bankruptcy. Lucian's eyes narrowed. If this man truly was Beast Alexander, chairman of the Academy and pioneer of the superpower system, then everything had just become far more dangerous. Later, he renounced magic and devoted himself entirely to science, so completely that the magical community branded him a heretic and hunted him to the ends of the earth. According to the records, Edward Alexander was finally surrounded and slain in a remote corner of England on December 9, 1947. Footprints detected. Edward Alexander. Lucian merely nodded. Confirming his guess was almost too easy. He wove the words of the tracking spell under his breath, and a thin ribbon of silver light shot forward, straight at the chairman of the circle, who now hung upside down before them. A tracking spell needed only a name, alias, or familiar tag to lock onto its quarry, unless that quarry was already dead or bound by powerful seals. A most intriguing enchantment, the chairman, Alistair, said, voice low and cold. No intricate runes, no arrays, no borrowed miracles, yet it finds any person you seek. But now that you know who I am, you must understand I won't let you leave this chamber alive. Alistair's eyes flashed like steel. He had never imagined that Clone 9981 could deduce his true identity so swiftly, simply from the burst of magic and a single specialized incantation. Lucian, however, betrayed no fear. He merely smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting in quiet confidence. Actually, he replied softly, that won't be necessary. Lucian's gaze remained steady as he addressed the hooded man before him. I don't care about your past, nor why you're intent on building Academy City. I won't betray your true identity to the Church. My only concern is getting stronger, reaching level 6, or learning the magic of your world. By naming the director outright, Lucian revealed both his boldness and his calculation. Here's my proposal. We work together. You can't afford to stay hidden forever, and I can handle a few discreet tasks for you. In return, you teach me everything you know about magic. It's a win-win. After all, Alistair, known in certain circles as Edward, was one of the founding pillars of modern magic. He must hold secrets far beyond any of the 103,000 grimoires in existence. If Lucian could gain his instruction, he'd surpass what countless scholars had achieved by rote study. Alistair leaned back, fingertips pressed together. His cold gaze never wavered. You have a point. Harboring you does expose me, and it complicates my plans. Perhaps it would be safer to eliminate you now. Lucian watched him coolly. The offer of cooperation hung in the air, met by the unsettling suggestion of a permanent solution. Alistair's refusal was unmistakable, but the gamble had only just begun. Lucian stared at Alistair across the vast chamber, his expression calm despite the deadly tension between them. In Alistair's mind, if Saka 9981 never discovered Lucian's true identity, Lucian's strength could still serve Alistair's schemes, but such a precarious alliance invited betrayal. The cleanest solution, Alistair decided, was to eliminate Misaka 9981 entirely and proceed with his plans unimpeded. You won't be able to kill me so easily, Lucian said quietly. If you expose your aura by attacking me outright, you'll only make things more dangerous for yourself. A predator's smile curled Alistair's lips. Dangerous for me? Our fight will be over in seconds. He fancied himself unbeatable. After all, Misaka 9981 was said to possess saint-level power. In an all-out battle, he believed her aura would flare uncontrollably, revealing her to his hidden forces. Lucian tilted his head. That's not necessarily true. With a graceful motion, Lucian traced an arc in the air, weaving a temporary, traceless expansion spell. Instantly, the chamber's dimensions ballooned hundreds of times over, its high ceiling and vast floor stretching into the distance. Alistair blinked, momentarily disoriented by the sudden shift in scale. Lucian closed his eyes and whispered another incantation, Animagus. In the next heartbeat, his human form elongated and thick scales erupted across his skin. His limbs lengthened, wings unfurled, and a long serpentine tail coiled behind him. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer a man, but a titanic dragon, nearly 500 meters from snout to tail. His roar shook the expanded hall, echoing like thunder. In this draconic guise, Lucian's strength and magical reserve surged to unimaginable levels. Alistair's confident smile faltered as he realized the fight was far from over, and that Lucian held every advantage in this gargantuan arena. Lucian's voice rang out across the vaulted chamber. The most important factor here is the dragon's innate magic resistance, extraordinarily high. No matter how powerful you are, Alistair, you're still a magician. Your spells will be severely weakened against me. He flexed his enormous wings, the membrane shimmering with latent power. And this, he added, isn't even my final form. These walls won't support my true size. So before you insist on a fight you can't win, why not accept my offer? We could cooperate and both come out ahead. With a roar that shook stone from the rafters, Lucian revealed his secret. Behold my true nature. My main body is, in fact, a dragon. Alistair staggered backward as a living colossus, scales glinting, claws longer than a man's arm, towered before him. Easily 500 meters tall, the dragon filled the chamber with pure, ancient power. Dragons don't exist, Alistair whispered, eyes wide. But he could see it with his own eyes. The creature wasn't an illusion or simulacrum. It was real. In their world, an underlying physical universe overlaid by layers of religious and mythological phases, magic drew its strength from realms beyond ordinary physics. Energy could be bent, twisted, even made to defy natural law. Yet actual mythical beasts were thought to be nothing more than the superstitions of vanished ages. And now, here stood proof to the contrary. Lucian's dragon eyes bored into Alistair's. So, he rumbled, do we do this the hard way or the smart way? Energy constructs, like those magical dragons summoned through arcane imitation, were one thing, but the colossal dragon looming before them clearly didn't belong to this world. It must have slipped through from another dimension. It wasn't a demon, nor was it an angel. It was simply a dragon. And somehow, that made all the difference. Lucian's instincts screamed that any attempt to kill the beast would instantly betray his presence. Worse yet, a full-scale battle would devastate large swaths of Academy City. When his companion finally proposed working together instead of fighting, Lucian weighed his options and agreed. You've convinced me. I'll cooperate. A short while later, Alistair reached his own conclusion. The power displayed by Masaka number 9981 had already given him pause, but even or troubling, were the countless uncertainties ahead. If he could somehow harness the abilities she'd revealed, every subsequent step would become far more manageable. And, with his plan moving forward, the risk of exposing his true identity was ever greater. So long as these otherworldly creatures were neither demons nor devils, cooperation was not only possible, it was essential. Chapter 3 and 18, Magical Spiritual Equipment, Third Update. President, I'm certain our cooperation will be most fruitful. Lucian exhaled in relief as he shifted back into his human form. If Alistair truly wanted to fight him, especially in the awe-inspiring demonic state he displayed against Cool, Lucian didn't stand a chance. He would have been forced to beat a hasty retreat. This outcome, however, was exactly what he'd hoped for. No longer would he need to scour every church in the world for new spells. Instead, he could study directly under a man who had touched the very essence of magic. His own cultivation would skyrocket. Alistair's previously stern expression softened at Lucian's calm posture. With a slight nod, he said, Since you're clearly not clone number 9981, what would you like me to call you from now on? Lucian allowed himself a small smile. Please call me Lucian. Very well, Lucian, Alistair replied. His tone was measured, but there was a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. Lucian wasted no time. And, would it be possible for me to have a room in this building? Somewhere private where I can rest and study? Alistair gestured toward a long corridor of vaulted doors. Of course, I'll have my attendants show you to a suite upstairs. Make yourself at home. As Lucian bowed in thanks, he realized that this unexpected alliance might mark the beginning of a new chapter in his magical journey, one that could elevate him far beyond any limits he'd ever imagined. That way, I can come to you whenever I need help with magic, Lucian said. Of course, Alistair replied. I'll have someone prepare a suitable room for you in the tower. Alistair harbored no real objection to Lucian's proposal. In fact, he welcomed it. Although he had agreed to collaborate, He didn't entirely trust someone who already knew his true identity. His vast surveillance network, the so-called hanging loop that spanned all of Academy City, proved powerless against Lucian's talents. By housing him in the research wing, Aleister could both extend his hospitality and keep a close eye on the prodigy. For the next 2 weeks, Lucian made himself at home among overflowing bookshelves and arcane instruments. He attended Aleister's private lectures, pored over dusty grimoires, and conducted experiment after experiment in the practice halls. Under Aleister's guidance, Lucian's grasp of this world's magical fundamentals deepened dramatically. Every question he posed received a precise, elegant solution, and more often than not, those very questions unlocked entirely new avenues of magical theory. Though each world's magic system bore its own trappings, Lucian and Aleister discovered they all shared the same core essence. While probing the fundamental nature of magic in this world, Lucian also drew rich inspiration from his studies of other realms' magical systems. He'd spent months synthesizing ideas from countless traditions, stripping away the superfluous in hopes of forging a system uniquely his own. Yet in practice, he'd only scratched the surface, copying techniques without truly grasping their core principles. As a result, his progress remained painfully slow. The root of the problem was that few mages anywhere could match Aleister's level of mastery, so relying on transplanted systems slowed Lucian's advancement. Consider the Harry Potter universe. Albus Dumbledore stands as its greatest wizard, but even he never fully unlocked his world's true magical essence. In the realm of the magic apprentice, Lucian's teacher Balthazar proved a capable mentor, but his skill still fell short of Aleister's benchmark. Legends like Merlin and Morgana may have approached deeper truths, crafting countless powerful spells, yet the gap between their insight and Lucian's aspirations remained vast. In the world of fairy tale, nearly every mage is self-taught. Guild wizards learn magic almost entirely through combat. They awaken new abilities in the heat of battle, fueled by emotion, and grow stronger with each fight. Very few ever pause to study magic's true essence. Ancient records do tell of the Dragon Era, when dedicated academies flourished and scholars probed the nature of arcane power, but all those schools were razed during the Great Dragon Wars. Across the realms now known as Middle-earth, Lucian has begun the first steps toward reviving that lost tradition. He has enlisted the aid of the elves to establish a new academy. One day, he hopes, to explore magic's primal principles alongside elven scholars. Even so, he knows that to pursue magic's deepest mysteries, he must journey farther still, to Valinor itself, where the gods dwell. On this particular afternoon, Lucian sat in his study, poring over a dusty tome that described the world's so-called spiritual garments. In his own notes, he calls them magical implements, spirit-infused arms and armor that differ from ordinary enchanted gear. These spiritual garments are modeled on legendary relics from countless mythologies, then imbued with their own powers. As he traced the arcane diagrams, Lucian felt the familiar thrill of discovery, the same spark that had driven the ancient academies, and that would, he vowed, light the way for a new age of magical understanding. Although these spiritual garments are merely replicas, they still draw on the mythic artifact's powers, albeit imperfectly. The more potent the original relic, the harder it is to reproduce. Take, for example, the nun's habit worn by the Index when Lucian last saw her among the army of 103,000 wizards. Crafted from pure white silk and embroidered in gold thread, this super-luxury vestment was the culmination of the Puritan Church's decades of research and labor. Known as the Mobile Church, it faithfully imitates the Holy Shroud of Turin, the very cloth said to have wrapped Christ's body when pierced by the spear of Longinus, and incorporates every element deemed essential by the Church. In theory, anyone wearing the mobile church habit enjoys protection on the scale of a nuclear bunker. Even if an atomic bomb detonated yards away, its force would scarcely scratch the fabric's bearer. Watching the Index move unscathed through arcane onslaughts, Lucian realized that mastering this kind of magical engineering could be his key to real power. Someday, he thought, he might create his own legendary spiritual clothing, drawn from the mythologies he so carefully studies, and turn imitation into something equally formidable. Lucian had been poring over arcane texts when he hit upon what he called idolism, the theory that mythic artifacts could be summoned from pure concept. He pointed to the legendary weapons of Investiture of the Gods or Journey to the West as examples. Even channeling a mere 10,000th of an item's original power, he argued, would be enough to awaken it fully, as if it were laughing in its dreams. In this world, magicians didn't limit themselves to Western mythologies. They drew on every tradition they knew, using magic to give form to things that never actually existed. Just as Lucian was sketching out the final piece of his theory, a knock sounded at his door. He glanced at the clock and realized this wasn't the hour for a study session. "Lucian," came a voice from the hallway, "the chairman requests your presence." He straightened his robes and took a steadying breath. His dealings with Alistair were still built on uneasy trust. Alistair had guided him in the world's magic, but never without reservation. With that in mind, Lucian stepped out into the corridor, bracing himself for whatever came next. Because Alistair had only taught him the modern magic system he'd invented, and deliberately withheld the ancient arts, Lucian insisted on firm ground rules before agreeing to assist. He refused to follow any order that involved killing innocents or wreaking wanton destruction. He promised to carry out each mission to the best of his ability, but he made it clear he couldn't guarantee success against overwhelming odds. Above all, his own life took priority. If escape proved impossible, he would withdraw rather than die needlessly in a trap. Lucian also demanded full disclosure of every mission's objectives and general parameters. No blind leaps into danger, no unspoken agendas. Alistair, in turn, distrusted Lucian's motives, so the two reached a tense understanding. Each would watch the other, and neither would accept a suicide assignment without a fail-safe escape. On top of that, Alistair stipulated one more condition. Whenever Lucian operated outside their headquarters, he was to maintain constant surveillance through the hanging loop, their scrying network, to prevent him from slipping away and warning the church of their plans. Lucian had no intention of warning anyone. He was far too pragmatic for that. Still, he agreed to keep the loop active, satisfying Alistair's paranoia and preserving their uneasy alliance. Chapter 319. The Great Star Festival begins. "Lucian, I need your help." In the center of the hall, Alistair hung upside down in his life support harness, the corners of his mouth curling into an amused smile. Lucian waved a hand, dismissing any courtesy. "Don't be so formal. You've taught me well these past weeks. I'll honor my end of the bargain. Just tell me exactly what you need and what dangers I'm walking into." Alistair drew a steady breath, then explained. "The Academy City is about to host the Great Hegemony Festival. 2 magicians with hidden agendas plan to slip in. One is a high-ranking envoy from the Roman Orthodox Church. Intelligence suggests they intend to broker a deal for a spiritual suit known as the Thorn Sword." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The Supreme Bishop of the Puritan Church, Laura Stewart, is convinced this Thorn Sword, an artifact capable of killing saints, will be turned against her own order. She's asked us to stop the transaction." Alistair's expression grew hard. "Frankly, I couldn't care less about the squabbles between Rome and the Puritans. In my eyes, every magician is an enemy. My goal remains unchanged, a world free of magic." He let that sit, eyes gleaming with cold determination. The mission was clear, albeit perilous, and Lucian felt the familiar surge of resolve in his veins. There would be no turning back now. He was, at least in name, now working with the Puritan Church, so he couldn't simply refuse. Besides, this assignment was the perfect chance to train Kamiju Tuma. He'd agreed at once. "So you want me to take out those 2 magicians?" Lucian's eyes lit up. He'd spent the past weeks studying the theory behind spiritual artifacts, and he knew all about the most infamous among them, the Thorn Sword. Forged in imitation of the Spear of Longinus, the very lance said to have pierced Christ, it carried a unique, dreadful power. Once its wielder locked eyes on a saint, no matter how far away, the blade's magic would automatically activate and kill that divine being. Against anyone else, however, it was utterly useless. That singular purpose, combined with the horrors it could unleash, had earned the Thorn Sword its reputation as the darkest, most evil spiritual weapon ever created. Rumor claimed it had been lost to history long ago. In this world, saints aren't just high-level mages. They're people who have attained the power of the Son of God, akin to the miracles and authority of Jesus himself. Their raw strength makes them the true nuclear arsenals of the magical realm. Ordinarily, a single saint has the power to seize control of a fully fortified modern city. Saints share traits with the Son of God and can channel fragments of his divine power. Their bodies are nearly indestructible. They move faster than the speed of sound. Their prowess in close-quarters combat is unmatched, and their magical reserves far exceed those of ordinary mages. At present, fewer than 20 saints exist worldwide. Alistair leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the lamplight. If the Roman Orthodox Church acquires artifacts like the spike-hanged sword, relics forged specifically to neutralize saints, the Puritan Church's own saints will be in mortal peril. We've arranged for Lucian, a top student from Academy City, to partner with a magician of the Puritan Church and intercept the transaction. Your orders are clear. Stop them. And if they can't, you will. He let the threat hang in the air for a moment, then smiled. In truth, he had no cause for concern. Powerful though they might be against saints, those spiritual implements were useless against psychics. Even if Lucian and the Puritan magician succeeded, only the Puritan Church would suffer, and that outcome suited Alistair's larger plans perfectly. Alistair frowned as he stared at the city map spread across the table. You really think the Roman Orthodox Church has come to Academy City merely to trade the thorn sword? His voice was low, threaded with suspicion. Or might they be hiding some larger agenda? Lucian met his gaze calmly. Better to assume the worst, he replied. If something goes wrong, you won't have time to respond or marshal reinforcements. But with the power I demonstrated last week, there's zero chance of trouble. Alistair leaned back, relief flickering in his eyes. That's reassuring. All right, what are the names of the two magicians involved? Lucian tapped his chin thoughtfully. Ladovia Lorengetti and Oriana Thompson. Ladovia is a bona fide Roman Orthodox priestess from the Vatican, high-ranking, and the one purchasing the thorn sword. Oriana Thompson is a well-known freelance courier in the magical community, specializing in tracking and anti-tracking spells. Understood, said Alistair. Do we even know where they are right now? Lucian shook his head. They haven't arrived yet, but the moment they set foot in Academy City, I'll have eyes on them. I've already arranged surveillance spells around the transport checkpoints. As soon as they register, you'll be the first to know. Alistair nodded once, satisfied. That saves a lot of headaches. Lucian inclined his head. Consider it handled. Alistair's floating, looped intelligence network, 50 million nanoscale surveillance units scattered throughout Academy City, leaves nothing hidden. On the morning of the Great Star Festival, Lucian launched himself out of the windowless research tower, headphones in place. Those headphones link him directly to Alistair's network. The moment Roman Orthodox Church magicians or the Thorn Sword transporters set foot inside Academy City's perimeter, he'll be alerted. At that point, Kamijo Toma, the student champion of Academy City, and his allies from the Puritan Church will mobilize to intercept them. Should they fail, Lucian will step in personally. He's already observed Toma in action. Though officially only a level 0 Esper, the young man wields a right hand capable of nullifying any magic or supernatural phenomenon, an ability that makes him far more dangerous than his rating suggests. Lucian tapped his headset, surveying the streets below. It was almost festival time. Students in uniform thronged the avenues, mingling with visitors and street vendors, hawking snacks and festival treats. Everything looked so lively. Yet Lucian knew that beneath the cheerful bustle, a deadly confrontation was about to begin. Each year, Academy City throws open its gates for the 7-day Daihaksing Festival, a massive, citywide sports extravaganza that draws more than 1.8 million competitors and welcomes visitors from across the globe. For these 7 days, outsiders are free to enter Academy City, and proud parents flood in to cheer on their children. All participants are enrolled students, and every contest highlights the extraordinary, special abilities these young espers possess. Broadcasters beam every event live to audiences worldwide. Though officially a sports festival, Daihaksing's staged matches often resemble spectacular superpower duels, albeit under strict rules that forbid any ability capable of endangering spectators. Even so, some of the most potent level 5 espers must hold back, ensuring nothing goes too far. Behind the pageantry lies Alistair's intent, to demonstrate Academy City's might and deter rash actions by the magic churches, while also showcasing its pool of talent to any eager recruits. Lucian tapped the side of his headset as Alistair's calm voice came through. The two magicians haven't arrived yet. Feel free to take a walk. Academy City's Great Star Festival is in full swing, or you could seek out your friends. I noticed you got along well with Misaka Mikoto and the others. He nodded. Understood. Just let me know when they show up. He knew exactly why Alistair was encouraging this. The more ties he forged with Academy City's students, the less likely he'd be to drift toward the magical faction. Building genuine friendships here would secure his loyalty, and that was exactly what Alistair wanted. Strolling through the bustling streets, I picked up a few tempting snacks before making my way to the main field for the Daiha Star Festival's opening ceremony. When I arrived, the stands were already packed with students, and the ceremony had reached its final phase, the recitation of the student oath. I tugged my cap low, leaned against a wall, and took a long sip of my drink as I watched. Before the assembly stood two of Academy City's 7 Level 5 espers, Sogita Gunha and Shokuho Misaki. Together, they spoke the oath on behalf of all ability students. From what I'd heard, Gunha wasn't like the others. He was one of the rare raw stone espers, a natural-born ability user. Nearly every esper in this city gained their powers through Alistair's system, purchasing or unlocking them by design. But raw stone espers were born with their gifts. No fees, no tests, just untamed power from birth. Compared to ordinary espers and magicians, they were the true darlings of this world. If these 7 espers had lived in a time before magic or supernatural powers were known, ordinary humans would have worshipped them as gods. Among them, Shokuho Misaki stands out, the only true psychic of the group. With her long, blonde hair and poised beauty, she can read minds, implant suggestions, erase memories, induce vivid hallucinations, and maintain effortless telepathic contact. Right now, Shokuho Misaki and Sogita Gunha stood side by side on the stage, each delivering a speech on behalf of the student body. At first, their remarks paralleled one another, but halfway through, Gunha's practiced lines deserted him. He began to riff wildly, tossing out off-the-cuff jokes and fanciful tangents. The auditorium buzzed with surprised laughter as the ceremony threatened to spin out of control. Fortunately, Gunha was only a second year, and he never strayed too far from the program. Before things could derail completely, the event host swooped in, reclaimed the microphone, and called the next contest into order. There will be 18 events in total, split between this morning and the afternoon session. Let us now begin Event 1, the Wooden Staff Competition. With that, the competition officially opened. A steady stream of students filed out of their seats and toward the arena floor, leaving large clusters of empty chairs in the stands as the first matches prepared to start. She's here. Lucian's eyes snapped to the newcomer. Index, the young nun who carried 103,000 forbidden magic texts in her mind. He'd met her once before, and now he moved toward her with steady purpose. In his time with Alistair, Lucian had already learned more of the magical world's true secrets than he'd ever dreamed possible. He realized how naive he'd been to think he could simply study spellbooks in the great church libraries or siphon knowledge from wandering magicians' memories. The authentic grimoires, the ones that actually teach you to wield magic, are never left in public stacks. Only fully trained sorcerers ever see them, and those volumes are zealously guarded by formidable mages. Even with the talents he'd acquired, Lucian knew that if he provoked a battle, he'd be hopelessly outnumbered and likely trapped. Alistair himself had once been so overwhelmingly strong that his wounds from that first confrontation still ran deep, driving him into hiding ever since. And Lucian's own effortless dive into Shirley's memories? That had only been possible within the walls of Academy City, where most magicians are barred and anti-scrying wards run deep. At church headquarters, he wouldn't stand a chance of pulling off the same feat. Yet here he was, moving steadily toward Index, prepared to find out just how far he could go. When Lucian realized that a single mistake could set the entire church, and very likely the whole magical world, on his trail, he knew he had to be cautious. Alistair, after all, would never allow him unfettered access to every spell in existence. especially those lying beyond the bounds of the modern magic system. Yet Lucian's ambition extended far beyond mere proficiency. He longed to grasp the true essence of magic itself, and one day ascend to the realm of gods. He couldn't forget the 103,000 magic tomes sealed away in Index's mind. Her mental defenses were unbreakable now, but Lucian was convinced that once he'd mastered Alistair's teachings, absorbed the world's greatest spells, and even forged his own system, he might shatter her barrier by sheer force of arcane knowledge. Until that day, his strategy was simple: form a genuine bond with Index, earn her trust, and wait for the perfect opportunity. Taking a steadying breath, he stepped into her cluttered chamber and offered a bright greeting. "Hello, Index." Index lay slumped on a makeshift bench, her calico kitten curled on her head like a living hat. She lifted her head slowly, eyes half closed. "I'm so hungry," she murmured. When she met Lucian's gaze, a flicker of recognition passed across her face, and a small, grateful smile followed. "It's you, Misaka." Lucian stepped into the small room, a handful of snack bags rustling in his arms. Before him sat Index, her silver hair tumbling over the back of the chair, eyes fixed on the unexpected bounty. "Are you Misaka's sister?" she asked, cocking her head. She'd been expecting Makoto, school uniform, stern expression, but this was a sharply dressed young man in a tailored suit. Then it clicked. The brother who'd rescued her last time. "Sister?" Lucian repeated with a shrug. He didn't bother to correct her. Index's eyes went wide when she noticed the chips, candy, and drink bottles clutched against his chest. A thin line of drool formed at the corner of her mouth. "Wow, so much food! Will you share?" she pleaded, practically bouncing in her seat. "Of course," Lucian said, setting every last snack on the table. He stepped back, watching her. "You're amazing, better than your sister," Index crowed, ripping open a bag of potato chips and shoveling them in with gleeful abandon. As she ate, Lucian leaned forward and gently placed 2 fingers on the back of her neck. He closed his eyes, summoning his Esper ability, ready to probe her mind, to break through whatever magical defenses protected her thoughts. Instantly, his hand snapped back, as though it struck an invisible shield. A ripple of force pushed him away. "It's useless," he muttered. Even at his best, Lucian couldn't penetrate those wards. To crack Index's psychic barrier, he'd need power on the level of Professor Xavier at his peak, a level he was nowhere near. He watched her continue snacking, oblivious to his failed attempt. For now, all he could do was bide his time. Lucian shifted his gaze to the arena below. After a wild, chaotic skirmish, only 2 schools still had students standing firm, and one of them was Kamijo Tuma's. Tuma himself was right in the thick of it. Is he really a naturally gifted Esper, born of an original stone? Lucian narrowed his eyes. The so-called fantasy killer, the ability that erases every form of magic and supernatural power, far outclasses even Accelerator's skill. If Lucian could obtain that power, he'd be virtually untouchable. He could stand against a universe-level heavyweight, so long as that opponent didn't boast the near-indestructible physique of the Celestial faction. Could such an ability be replicated through pure analysis? Lucian doubted it. If it were that simple, Alistair would have done it ages ago. After all, Academy City's Esper program is built on reverse engineering original stone talents. If anyone could duplicate an extraordinary power like Fantasy Killer, it would be Alistair. There they are. Lucian watched as Alistair's car slipped through the city gates and onto Academy City's broad avenues. He was still mulling things over when Alistair's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Index, I've got other matters to attend to. I'm heading off now." Index, her cheeks stuffed with Lucian's homemade sandwiches, managed a muffled wave. She gulped down the last bite, wiped her mouth, and beamed at him. "Bye, Misaka Makoto's brother. Next time, I will treat you to lunch." Lucian gave a small wave in return as the car disappeared into the distance, leaving him and Index alone on the sidewalk.